Am I the asshole for calling the police after my mom abandoned my siblings at my doorpost moving out? When I became 20, I left my parents' house because it was intolerable. My name is Ethan, and I am currently 22 years old. They acted as though everything I owned belonged to them as well, frequently gave preference to my younger siblings, and utilized me as unpaid labor. When I moved out, my father, Mark, told me to remain away and not let the door hit me on my way out. I had been working at the same full-time job for almost 4 years, and I rented the tiniest and most economical apartment I could locate. Not even a month had passed when my parents, Mark and Emily, began phoning me to beg me to come back because someone else needed to look after my brothers. I said no, enjoying my newfound independence. Eventually, my father insisted that family should come before personal independence and made me move back and pay them rent. I responded that for once, I was living for me and that my life mattered too. We didn't talk for months after he said, "Let's see how long you last without us." I'm not sure what he was expecting, but I got along just fine without him. My family and I gradually began to patch things up once they came to terms with the fact that I wasn't going to return on my knees. They clearly found it difficult to accept that I now controlled the situation rather than them. Even though the two closest to me were in their late teens, they nevertheless pleaded with me from time to time to watch my youngest siblings. Since they had always thrown the babysitting load on me, my parents' refusal to take on the responsibility seemed hypocritical. They gaslighted me when I brought this up, and then they once more were silent for months. In the end, it was them who returned to seek my assistance. I recently purchased a used gaming console, but I was only able to afford the single game that was included. My mother requested me to keep my two youngest siblings for a bit one Saturday. I was left alone with them in my tiny apartment all day after she essentially pushed them inside and walked off. I contacted my mom and insisted that she come grab the kids, which is why she didn't come back until after 10 o'clock. She didn't like that I interrupted her enjoyment. I warned her that I would no longer watch my siblings all day unless she paid me, and that if she left them outdoors the next time, I would call the police and wouldn't even open the door. I discovered my gaming console was gone the following morning. I thought one of my siblings had taken it, so I contacted my parents. My mom said it could wait as my youngest sibling was playing on it and she didn't have the heart to take it away, even though I stated I would come over right soon to retrieve it. I claimed that it had been stolen without my consent and that I would be picking it up. As fast as I could, I rode my bike to their house. My sibling was crying when I got there since they were missing the charger and the console's battery had died. When I asked for it back, my father took it and told I could have it back if I helped out more with my siblings. I wasn't bluffing when I informed him that I would call the cops if he wanted to play that game. He refused to back down until I began making phone calls. My mother shouted, "Hold on." I swiftly reclaimed the console from my father. She claimed it wasn't worth having the cops come on them, but he called her a traitor and insisted she give it back to him rather than to me. I assured them before I left that I would not think twice about calling the police if this occurred again. They could purchase their own gaming console if they truly wanted one for my siblings. My father, Mark, screamed that I couldn't treat him in such a disrespectful manner. I retorted that I'm an adult, but he's never bothered to treat me with any respect, and I'd had enough. He then yelled at me to turn around and face him as I left. At the moment, they are once again silent. I once received a text from my mom, Emily, pleading with me to continue watching my siblings. Since I wasn't doing it for free anymore, especially after they stole from me and attempted to prevent me from reclaiming my property, I told her that if she really wanted me to babysit, she could pay me, but I would only accept the money up front. I am not their property. They can either adjust or become disoriented since I am an adult with a place of my own and a life of my own. Since that text exchange more than a week ago, none of them have gotten in touch with me, which is okay. They are capable of handling their own mess. Update. It's unbelievable that I completely forgot about this account for almost a year, but I happened to stumble upon my original post when browsing Reddit videos online. I've returned to provide an update after realizing that I completely neglected to do so. Toward the end, there will be some light fighting and police intervention. I thought I'd bring it up even though I'm not sure if that counts as a trigger warning. I recently wrote about my parents' refusal to return my gaming console after one of my siblings stole it, as some of you may be aware. If my parents ever drop my younger siblings off at my door without asking again, a lot of commentators advise contacting the police or CPS. I waited and waited, but it had been around 3 months since my mother had last called, and I wouldn't watch my siblings for free. Then it came at last. When my parents unexpectedly called to ask me to watch the kids, they pretended if the previous console incident had never occurred. I informed them that it had to be a day when I was off from work and that I would not babysit unless they paid me. I no longer had Saturdays off due to a change in my schedule. Since they most frequently asked me to babysit on Saturdays, I really asked my boss for it. Additionally, it was more cost-effective for me to take on an additional shift. As usual, my dad became enraged and told me to man up and lend a hand. As he usually promised to do at my age, I pointed out that he should stop acting as though he controlled me and that, in a technical sense, I was manning up for myself and my own life. However, he dumped a lot of his duties on me and worked on Saturdays so he could forget about them. I was finished with their demands, as far as I was concerned. My mother grabbed the phone away from him after he began screaming into it. Since Sunday is my sole day off, I stated that I could only watch on Sundays and that I would only do so if I was paid $40 and my siblings' lunches, dinners, and snacks were prepared in advance. Since feeding them isn't my responsibility, I wasn't going to waste my money on it. I also made it plain that I would call the police to retrieve anything that was taken from me, such as my console the previous time it was stolen. To make it easy for the authorities to verify that it is mine, I kept the receipt from the time I purchased it and wrote down the serial numbers. My mother became enraged and began to curse like a sailor who had just lost a tooth. Before she discovered I wasn't answering and began insisting I say anything, I let her vent while essentially ignoring the phone. My demands were Sundays only, $40, and prepackaged food, or else they could forget about it, I said to her and my father. On the other end of the line, there was a moment of astonished quiet. My mother then blasted me once again, claiming that my younger siblings, who are 13 and 16 years old, had to take over for me because I was no longer there and they needed a vacation. "Oh, like how you guys gave me breaks?" I asked, laughing. As never before. My mother attempted to claim that because I was the eldest child, things were different. I explained to her that it wasn't different at all. I had lost out on a lot of my youth because they had parentified me. It is hypocritical of them to pretend as though I should take over again now that I am living on my own without them. The two teens living with them are capable of doing anything I used to do. My mother went into victim mode and said that my adolescent siblings were disobedient and unheard. Since I was too busy living my life, I informed her that their issues weren't mine and that they needed to find another daycare provider. My father returned to the phone and began to scream at me once more. He was simply blowing hot air and not actually saying anything, so I just laughed at him. My mother retrieved the phone and begged me again. I restated, $50, prepared food, Sundays only, and I would not think twice about calling the police if I received threats or had any of my belongings stolen. My parents began arguing loudly at one another about what to do, so I told them to figure it out and get back to me later. I hung up after that. For a time, radio silence returned. A few weeks later, I was getting ready for work on a Saturday morning when I heard a loud, quick knock at my door, the kind where you can tell they're using both hands. I've heard my mom knocking for years to let me know she was there, so I'm familiar with the sound. What sounded like someone rushing noisily along the hallway after the banging. Hearing my two youngest siblings arguing and tapping on the door themselves, I listened through the door. My mom had just run off, leaving them outside the door. I had a straightforward strategy for this because of all the warnings I received after my last post. I simply rolled down my window, got out, and left. I can easily climb out of the window by just ripping the screen out of my ground-level apartment. I contacted my neighbor, a kind elderly woman who enjoys having children, who lives a few doors down, and gave her the scoop. She has long been aware of my predicament with my narcissistic parents, and she phoned the police so I could inform them that two children were left in the hallway after their mother beat on a door and fled. Let's just say that my siblings were picked up by the cops. Later, I got a call from my parents, who were very upset. I asked them what they were so upset about, acting as though I had no idea. When I inquired if my mother had simply left my two youngest siblings at my door without anyone answering, she completely acknowledged that she had left them there for me to watch before running away. She explained that I was already out because I had to work on Saturdays. After a few moments of silence, my mother screamed, "How in the world was I meant to know that?" I retorted that she was solely to blame and that she had practically left her children at my door, hoping that I might have been home on a day that I had previously informed her I worked on multiple occasions. By forcing me to watch them, she was attempting to make me miss a shift. She began offering justifications, but I told her that what she had done was unacceptable and immature. I waited for her to stop weeping for a while before asking if she was finished. She reverted to her hostile demeanor and kept shouting. She shouted that she was being charged with child abandonment by the police. She left the children in the hallway, so I replied that wasn't really my fault. Then I said that if I had been at home and she had refused to come back for the kids, I would have called the police on her too because I had already informed them that I now worked on Saturdays and I didn't want to be forced to babysit anymore. She continued to argue pointlessly for the remainder of the call, which didn't really accomplish anything. In the end, my mom just received a fine and a slap on the wrist because she persuaded the police that she genuinely believed I was home. At least that's what my next sibling claimed when he contacted me. The fact that she had to pay a fine should make her reconsider leaving children at my door and fleeing again, but I'm not sure how much it was. Since my dad was at work and said he didn't know she was going to leave my brothers at my door, he wasn't charged. He was reportedly furious with my mother for doing it. I couldn't stop laughing at this pot and kettle scenario. However, I suppose I must give my old guy credit because he had never done what my mother did. In any case, my mom now has a police record, which is, in my opinion, a first strike in the eyes of the law. Thanksgiving was the turning point after that. I was completely anticipating my parents' invitation to be a trap of some sort. It was too. My dad pretended to be in control while he sat at the table smoking a cigarette during supper. He said, enough was enough, and that he was ending this farce after having my mom sit me down. He informed me that they had no more time for themselves and that the fine my mom had to pay had a significant negative financial impact, so I needed to return home, help with the bills and mortgage, and help raise my siblings. Regardless of how much he tried to command me, I just answered no, and I continued to do so. Even though he's a big man, he became so enraged that he actually attacked me. Fortunately, I'm not either, having acquired some amateur fighting techniques and been going to the gym for months. When he came at me, I kicked him quickly in the balls because I was wearing steel-toed boots too, and then I struck him hard enough in the face that he fell to the ground in an instant. He landed with a loud thud and clutched his groin, vomiting from the pain. I then informed my parents that I could easily prove he attacked me first because I had my phone filming in my pocket the entire time. I complied with my dad's order to leave his house and never return, but not before stealing a turkey leg from the plate and riding home to eat it. The only people who have phoned or contacted me since are my siblings. I marched out like a boss, they claimed, and now dad's poor balls are the subject of constant jokes in the house. I was invited to return for other holidays after spending Christmas with a friend's family. Update: my parents blame me for losing the baby because my mom was pregnant. I now see why my parents attempted to have me return home for Thanksgiving. I have just learned that my mom was expecting her 6th kid. First of all, shortly after my last post, one of my siblings discovered my Reddit account and showed it to our parents. In response, my parents stormed into my apartment and yelled at me, accusing me of being a horrible parent and of arranging for my mom to be detained. Yes, they are. Standing in my doorway, I yelled at them for all they had done, including putting my siblings at my door on a day when they knew I was at work. In any case, that is poor parenting. I would have called the police on mom when she left the kids at my door, so it didn't really matter that I set them up, it wouldn't have mattered in the end. I replied that behavior alone confirms my belief that they are bad parents, and my dad appeared to be about to raise a fist in my direction. Then he said that if he tried to hit me, it would end the same way it happened the last time, and I didn't think my boots, yes, I was wearing them, could hit his balls again. When he remembered what I had done to him the last time, Dad appeared to wince and tense his legs together. In the end, he dragged my mother out by the hand and left. Before he left the corridor, he shouted back that since I was entirely to blame, he expected me to reimburse them for the fine they had to pay for child abandonment. I informed them that I owed them nothing and told them to fuck off. They remained silent in response. I received some extremely horrible news not long ago. After a terrible incident at home, where she tripped on damp porch stairs and fell face down in gravel, my mom, who was about 7 months pregnant, lost the baby. To be honest, when I saw her before that, I had no idea she had been pregnant. She's always been awkward and a little heavier than average, not fat, but just enough that it's hard to tell if she's pregnant or not. She definitely wanted someone to blame because this was her first miscarriage, which is heartbreaking. I destroyed the family by not assisting them and by costing them a lot of money, therefore in her opinion, someone had to be me. She was on crutches when she and Dad returned to my place to accuse me of being the cause. I didn't come home to help when they needed me, thus she lost the baby. I called them out on their attempts to blame me for something that wasn't my fault and their need for free childcare, which led to a quite heated debate. In any case, I assured them, it's not my fault that they became pregnant again when Mom was 45. Dad was too frugal to ever replace or repair the decaying old porch, so blame it on it. When I said that, my father put his hands on me once more and gave me a stinging right hook. I ultimately kicked his ass again after that. I've continued to train out at the gym, and I've gotten stronger since defeating him during Thanksgiving last year. There was no chance for him. My mother's yelling forced me to stop when I lost my temper and broke his nose and knocked out both of his front teeth. My father needed to be transferred to the hospital, so the police called and I was placed in handcuffs. Fortunately, My apartment complex's halls are equipped with CCTV, and I also had my phone camera recording behind me in my unit. When my parents knocked, I began to record. The video clearly demonstrated that I defended myself after my father hit me first. Since it was deemed self-defense, I'm basically safe, but now my parents want to sue me for my dad's medical fees and the fine they had to pay earlier. I defeated Dad, so he won't be able to go to work for a while. He has 2 lost teeth, a black eye, a broken nose, a neck brace, and who knows what else. He is also really upset that he had to shave off his beard. I suppose this makes him even more dead to me because I already thought he was pretty well dead before this. He no longer has the little authority he once believed he had as my father. Because of all the hard work I've put in over the past few months, I'm physically stronger than him and will soon be starting a new job that pays significantly more. I might be able to get a much better place to live after a few years of saving. When my oldest sibling became 19, they called to tell me that I was their hero for beating the living daylights out of Dad and that they were going to leave, just like me. However, my parents found out about my Reddit posts once my next sibling discovered them after hearing about them on YouTube. My mother apparently forced them to show her my post after overhearing them discussing it. They stated she broke items because she was angry. My siblings have expressed regret for letting Mom and Dad know, and they claim that if they had realized Mom was listening, they would never have brought it up. Additionally, both have expressed their happiness that there won't be another child. They already have to handle a lot of my parents' babysitting, which they detest. They acknowledge that they first blamed me for leaving, but they now understand that you have the right to choose your own path as an adult. Whether my parents will actually attempt to sue me is still up in the air, but I believe I can state that if they do, it will be a loss for them. My friend's uncle is a lawyer, and he promised to defend me in the event that my parents filed a lawsuit. He adds that since it was self-defense, they don't have much of a case. To my folks, who will most likely see this, leave me alone, please. That's all I have to say. My siblings and I are not your property, and I will assist them in leaving your home when they are old enough to do so at the age of 19. Both of you have always been self-centered egotists. It's not my fault that Mom lost the baby, and it's not my fault that you struggled so much without me around to watch your kids for free. Think of that smashed nose and missing teeth as a good excuse to avoid me in the future. Remember that because of you two, I have only told you a small portion of the nonsense that occurred in my life. I could share story after story about the events in my early years if I so desired. However, I wouldn't be satisfied with it. So please, don't bother me. P.S. Yes, my mom had to give birth to a stillborn baby at the hospital, but I wasn't going to bring it up earlier. According to my siblings, my parents had a secret funeral among themselves, and Mom brought home a little urn that she keeps in the bedroom. After leaving with the urn for a few hours, they returned intoxicated. My mom spent over 6 days in the hospital due to whatever injuries she sustained in the fall. I've contacted my siblings for further information. Someone asked if she had been shoved. I'm now doubting that myself. The only excuse I could come up with was that Mom was in a hurry to be somewhere when she slipped and fell off the porch. I've heard of folks suffering more severe injuries in more foolish ways. When I researched the cremation procedure, I found that it would take 8 to 12 days to obtain the ashes. This indicates that the urn they brought home was empty. I'm completely perplexed. However, my parents' funeral took place a few days after Mom left the hospital. Until the day of their small funeral, my parents kept that urn in the bedroom. They may have collected the ashes by then, I suppose. Perhaps it explains why they returned home intoxicated, but this situation is so strange and twisted that I'm having a hard time thinking about it anymore. Revise posting again so soon feels strange. I mentioned in my last post that my mom had a recent miscarriage following a serious fall. I had a bad feeling about the information I was given. I concluded that going directly to the source was the only way to obtain the truth after reading all of the comments I had gotten about it. I visited my parents on Sunday. They both appeared to be in terrible shape and were at home, sleeping. In addition to using crutches to walk more than a few steps, my mom appeared to be very exhausted. I saw that she had numerous bruises and bandages on her face from the fall a few steps from the door. My father. To find out how he appeared, read my previous post's depiction of him following the thrashing I inflicted. When I arrived, my parents were blown away. I insisted on knowing if there was ever a baby or if this was all a pathetic attempt to coerce me into returning home. After what happened, my dad claimed I had a lot of guts to show there and let myself in. However, my mother sobbed as she revealed that she had actually been pregnant. She stumbled into the bedroom and picked up a little urn that seemed really elaborate. It was filled with ashes. They didn't smell like anything, even when I looked to see if they resembled cigarette or barbecue ashes. I didn't really smell anything at all. Even though I had looked online and saw that it takes at least 8 to 12 days to get the ashes returned, I questioned why they brought the urn home and said that the ashes were already inside. Mom had spent no more than 6 days in the hospital. According to my mom, they purchased the urn online with the hope of retrieving the baby's ashes upon visiting the crematorium. They simply waited till they could retrieve the ashes a few days later and then went out to get drunk because they were so distraught that they couldn't bring the kid home yet. Mom said she begged the crematorium to do things a little faster. Her eyes were filled with real tears. Although I've witnessed her crocodile tears numerous times, this one didn't appear to be that. I learned more about my mother's fall and what transpired. She was late for her appointment with her physician, an OB/GYN, or whatever they are called. Mom clarified that she was attempting to get out to her appointment after oversleeping during her nap. Then, as she attempted to down the stairs, she slipped on a toy. About 3 years ago, the porch's guardrails deteriorated and snapped off, and Dad never restored or repaired them. Mom had nothing to cling to then. She fell straight off the porch, hitting the ground with her face and belly first. She even showed me the marks from her landing all over her stomach. She informed me that the child would have been a male. There would have been one more brother in addition to my 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Then Mom told me that because of her age and past injuries, a doctor advised her not to try to conceive again since her body might not be able to take it. It wasn't any easier to hear in person, but I kind of assumed that was the case after some individuals messaged me about it. At last, I posed the crucial query: why did she hold me responsible? Mom began to add something along the lines of, the day they showed up at my apartment was just really, really bad. But Dad interrupted her. It's all my fault, he screamed. I would have been there to help if I had followed his advice and returned home for Thanksgiving, and now I'm responsible for the death of a baby. I screamed back at him, telling him that he was to blame since Mom might not have fallen if he had actually bothered to fix the fucking porch. Furthermore, not that it would have made a difference, he didn't even bother to inform me that Mom was expecting back at Thanksgiving. Instead of taking sides, my mother simply left the room in tears as we kept ranting at one another. My dad was so red that he looked like a lit match. He shouted for me to leave his house and waved his ancient hunting knife at me. He told me I was no longer his son as I was leaving. He was always a bad father, so I informed him that I hadn't seen him as a father in years. I told him before I left that I would be requesting a restraining order and that he would have to deal with the authorities the next time he attempted to harm my siblings in the same way that he had done me. He will lose more than a few teeth, and if he attempts the same nonsense with my siblings as he did with me, I won't think twice about calling the police or CPS. He swore at me from the front door, saying things like, "You son of a..." I retorted that that was a slight to Mom, and he became enraged once more. After that, I saluted him with one finger and rode off on my mountain bike. So, I suppose that's the best response I can give someone. I'm not sure what the truth is if this isn't it. Does it matter now though? As soon as possible, I'm going to file for a restraining order, and once I start earning money from my new work, I'll be seeking to transfer apartments. After this, I'm not sure whether I'll feel like updating again. Unless my parents do something horrible to my siblings, I think I might be done here since I'm just going to be depressed thinking about all of this. I hope I've made my message clear to them. Even though I've already given Dad 2 beatings, he still held that knife with a hint of fear. He thought he was staring at a monster. Perhaps he views me as a monster, but if that means he never harms my siblings, then that's okay. Sir, he will be the monster. I was always overshadowed by my stepmother and stepfather's favoritism toward my stepsister, despite my hard work and achievements. Since I was 15, I have had to deal with my step-parents' blatant partiality toward my stepsister. My mom remarried Robert, 45 million, who owns his own accounting firm, and that's when it all began. Linda, 42F, his wife, is a real estate agent and is always immaculately dressed in fashionable outfits with flawlessly manicured nails. Ashley, 19F, their daughter, is the same age as myself. Almost immediately after we moved in together, the first indications of preferential treatment surfaced. Although there was plenty of room in our suburban Connecticut home for everyone, it soon became obvious that Ashley was the queen. My step-parents made sure Ashley stood out in every manner, even though other parents treat their kids the same way. Everything that came after was shaped by the day of the move. I was assigned the smaller room that faced the brick wall of the neighbor's house, and Ashley was given the larger bedroom with the bay window and window seat. Shopping excursions turned into a distressing reminder of my role within the family. Ashley would shop at high-end stores for designer clothing and new Nike sneakers, while I was told to check out Target's sale shelves. Robert gave me a $50 Old Navy gift card the first time this happened, and I recall standing in the mall watching Linda and Ashley vanish into Nordstrom. He said, Get whatever you need? And turned to follow them. I will never forget the casual dismissal and the unambiguous message about my position in the family hierarchy. The way they treated us at family time was more painful than the tangible differences. Whenever Ashley talked about her day at supper, Linda and Robert would genuinely listen and lean in to offer follow-up questions. They would hardly look up from their plates when it was my turn to contribute, making merely infrequent mm-hms or bringing up other topics. I once attempted to spread the word about my victory in the school science fair. Linda cut me off before I could finish, reminding Ashley that her costume fitting for the dance recital was coming soon. It was especially annoying when it came to extracurricular activities. Ashley participated in every activity in which she even remotely expressed interest, including private tennis instruction, dance classes, piano lessons, art workshops, and drama club. I asked to join the school's debate team, which only cost $100 to register, but Linda replied, "We need to be mindful of the budget." The following day, they enrolled Ashley in private swimming lessons that cost $200 per hour because she said she liked the water. Our communal restroom turned into yet another battlefield. Ashley's side was filled with pricey Sephora skincare and makeup, while I utilized cheap brands that I purchased with my stipend, which was a fourth of Ashley's. The towels were also different. I used the simple ones from the hall closet, but she had soft monogrammed pairs. She was so upset when I inadvertently used one of her face washes by accident that Linda had to create a lockable cabinet for Ashley's particular items. As high school went on, the gap between our intellectual abilities grew more noticeable. Ashley found it difficult to maintain a B average, whereas I kept straight A's. However, their reaction to our accomplishments was oddly biased. Ashley's favorite Italian restaurant hosted a celebration dinner after she received a B+ on a history test. After I was elected into the National Honor Society, Linda asked Ashley about her cheerleading practice without even looking at the letter. I could never do it justice, but family photos do. Ashley is the focal point of every photo, typically sporting a fresh, stylish outfit. I appear like an afterthought in my own family photographs, always in the background, wearing whatever was on sale. Since Linda had just provided him with Ashley's dimensions and preferences for the shoot, the photographer really questioned whether I was a family friend assisting with our junior year photo session. Holiday festivities turned into just another reminder of my position within the family. Ashley would always have more gifts than I had at Christmas, including high-end gadgets, designer clothing, and whatever else was in style at the time. Typically, I gave useful presents like socks, generic school supplies, or small-value gift cards. Ashley received an iPhone and a MacBook Pro for Christmas last year. I received some clothing from a bargain retailer and a $50 Target gift card. Linda was already documenting Ashley's reaction to her new laptop when I attempted to thank them nevertheless. Their treatment of our social lives was also in contrast. For their get-togethers, Linda would order pizzas and provide fancy refreshments, and Ashley was encouraged to have friends over at any time. I once requested permission to bring 2 friends over so we could study for our finals. "Just keep it down," Linda added, "and make sure they bring their own snacks." "We're saving the good stuff for Ashley's cheerleading squad party tomorrow," she continued without taking her eyes off her phone. There is so much more to tell about how things developed from here, particularly with what transpired with my mom during all of this and how I ultimately received support from an unexpected source. I have been keeping notes on my phone about everything that has happened. If you would want to hear the rest of the story, please let me know. It becomes more challenging, particularly when some family secrets are revealed and college preparations start. In our junior year, things really began to change. I applied for a job at a neighborhood coffee shop after deciding I needed some independence. Ashley reacted right away when I told them over supper. As she gave Ashley another $100 cash for her weekend shopping, Linda nodded in agreement and said, "Oh my God, you're actually going to be a waitress? That's so common." The coffee shop turned into a haven for me. I had coworkers that genuinely recognized me and appreciated my contributions for the first time. After noticing my attention to detail, my manager, Sarah, swiftly promoted me from simple cleaning tasks to drink preparation. I became an expert at managing the morning rush in 3 months. Regular clients would especially wait in my line since they knew I would accurately recall their intricate requests. "You're a natural at this," Sarah would say as she demonstrated new latte art techniques for me. At home, however, Linda and Robert persisted in their apathy, save for when they could make fun of my work. "Careful with that plate, Ashley," Robert would say every night when they were eating. "Don't want you ending up as a waitress." They chuckled as I cleared the table in silence, presumably oblivious to the irony of my doing just what they were making fun of. Academically, I also had a sea change in my junior year. My lab reports were frequently cited as examples for the class by Mrs. Rodriguez in AP Chemistry. Notice how Audrey structured her methodology. she would add while pointing to the projector showing my work. I felt Ashley's eyes searing into my back, but I continued to concentrate on the task at hand. This is university-level precision. It felt good to get my efforts acknowledged after years of being unnoticed. Parent-teacher conferences were one very eye-opening experience. My performance was being evaluated by Mrs. Rodriguez. Your daughter has a remarkable grasp of complex concepts. She's top of the class, and her lab work shows exceptional promise for a future in scientific research. Before I had a chance to respond, Linda asked, "Are you sure you're not favoring her?" It seems like teachers always praise Audrey while ignoring Ashley's unique talents. With every academic achievement, the strain at home increased. My stepfamily seemed to respond equally and oppositely to every A+ I brought home. They would swiftly brush over my accomplishments and turn their attention to praising Ashley's most recent participation award or the C+ she worked really hard for. The night that altered everything then arrived. After finishing my calculus assignment, I was on my way to the kitchen for some water when I heard Linda and Robert conversing in their study. Normally, I would have disregarded their late-night chatter, but Robert's remarks made me take notice. He said, "Sometimes I wonder if we made a mistake," in a somber voice. Linda said, "What do you mean?" "Having both of them. Ashley would have been enough. She's everything we could want in a daughter. But Audrey, she's just there. We would have been fine with just Ashley." The glass nearly fell out of my grasp. My heart wasn't as fortunate, but I managed to catch it in time. In that instant, everything became crystal clear. All of the years spent hoping for a change and striving to win their love suddenly felt so pointless. I wasn't wanted by them. They didn't. I was the extra load they wished they didn't have to bear, the undesired addition. Something changed within me after that night. I gave up trying to win their approval and gave my studies my whole attention. My thinking unclogged in unexpected ways when I wasn't under the continual pressure to win their approval. My already excellent marks took on a remarkable quality. I started getting perfect scores, but they didn't notice or care. "Excellent analysis, Audrey," Mr. Peterson said one day in AP English as he held up my work about the Great Gatsby. Ashley tensed next to me, her pencil tapping angrily on her desk. "Class, this is exactly the kind of deep thinking I'm looking for. Your comparison of Gatsby's invented identity to modern social media personas is particularly insightful." From the corner of my eye, I could see her face getting red, but I continued to look straight. In other classes, similar scenes occurred. I was invited to a prominent essay competition in AP history because of my understanding of the Cold War. My experiment design in physics was chosen for the state science fair. Regardless of the subject, Ashley became more enraged the more the teachers complimented my efforts. When Mrs. Rodriguez invited me to coach other students in chemistry, that was the tipping point. She chuckled and remarked, "Your explanations are often clearer than mine. Would you consider leading some study sessions before the AP exam?" Ashley's voice came to me from downstairs that night. "Mom, the teachers are being mean to me. They always praise Audrey and make me look bad. They're doing it on purpose." With her high-end handbag swinging and her heels clicking on the linoleum flooring, Linda strode into school the following day. She marched into Principal Williams' office, where they summoned in Mrs. Rodriguez, and I observed from the corridor. "I want to know why your teachers are discriminating against my daughter," Linda pleaded. Mrs. Rodriguez pulled out our progress logs and placed them side by side while remaining composed and professional. "Here are both girls' records. Audrey consistently scores in the top percentile in all subjects, while Ashley—" "Are you saying my Ashley isn't intelligent?" Linda cut in, raising her voice. "Not at all. I'm merely pointing out Audrey's academic achievements." However, she was not persuaded by any amount of proof. I heard Linda explaining to Robert that day when she got home that the teachers were clearly biased against their precious Ashley. I had grown weary of begging for pocket money and seeing Ashley receive hundreds of dollars for simply being alive. My job at the coffee shop was now my passport to independence, not just a haven. I opened a second bank account that neither Linda nor Robert knew about, and I began saving every dime I could. The tips from the regular customers went directly into that account, and they frequently increased them after they found out I was saving for college. However, even this minor triumph was not without opposition. Ashley and her friends would frequently leave their empty cups on the table, purposefully spilling liquids to make my job more difficult, and then loudly comment on how sad it was to see people stuck serving coffee. The message was clear. I wasn't even permitted to excel in a job that they viewed as beneath them. My coworkers noticed and began taking their directions instead. "I don't want anything to do with you anymore. You're embarrassing with your tiny house and budget clothes. I've moved up in the world," Linda yelled in a heated phone conversation I had overheard years earlier. She had been speaking to her parents, my grandparents, whom I had never met because they weren't good enough for her new way of life. I sneaked into Linda's home office that evening while she and Ashley were out shopping again, this time for Ashley's pre-graduation wardrobe makeover. I located the location in the older part of town under DF4, Do Not Contact, in her address book. I felt a mixture of fear and hope when I looked at that address. These were my grandparents. They might genuinely be interested in getting to know me and consider me more than just an unwelcome member of someone else's ideal family. After my shift at the cafe tomorrow, I've made the decision to go see them. I don't know what to anticipate, but I know I have to try. The address is just a few blocks from my workplace, in a neighborhood Linda would likely deem below her. I've been missing the family link for years, but maybe, just maybe, I'll find it now. After I meet them, I'll provide an update. I feel like this could be the start of something significant. I have a feeling that meeting my grandparents could completely alter my destiny, not just my current circumstances. First update. 2 weeks have passed since my last post, and I'm amazed at how much has changed. I was standing in front of a tiny blue house with a well-kept garden after my shift at the cafe that day. Every step I took up the path to my grandparents' house felt heavier than the one before, and my heart was racing. The well-kept grass was covered in lengthy shadows from the late afternoon sun. The door opened when I held up my hand to knock, revealing my grandparents, an elderly couple. The man sported wire-rimmed glasses and a kind smile, and the woman, dressed in a flour-dusted flowered apron, had her gray hair pulled back in a tidy bun. When I said, "Hello, I'm Audrey Matthews. I think you're my grandparents," they gave me a perplexed look. Their mouths fell open at the same time. My grandma said, "Oh my God, Frank," as she put her palm to her mouth, "it's really her. You look just like your mother did at your age." After they invited me in, I found myself seated in their comfortable living room, sipping tea from fine cups as they stared at me intently. Photographs from decades of family history that I was unaware of dotted the walls. Among them, I saw photos of my mother in her teenage years, sporting the same bashful grin I had seen so many times in my own image. Numerous visits followed that initial one. I would spend hours with my grandparents, bringing them cookies and pastries from work, while pretending to be working extra shifts at the cafe. They truly cared about every aspect of my life and were excellent listeners. They questioned me in depth about what I was studying after I told them about my AP classes. They offered to help evaluate my essays when I brought up my college applications. Things at school kept getting more intense. Princeton sent me a large envelope one morning. I could hardly open it since my hands were shaking so much. Full academic scholarship. Before leaving for home, I hurried to show my grandparents, and their response was just what I had ever hoped for in a family. As Grandpa continued to remark, "I knew you had it in you, kiddo," Grandma began to cry. When I eventually told Robert and Linda about Princeton, they responded just as I had anticipated. Distractedly, Linda remarked, "That's nice, dear," before turning to face Ashley. "Honey, have you decided which state school you're applying to?" My acceptance was entirely forgotten as Ashley sniffed and announced that she was taking a gap year to find herself through travel and self-discovery. Within minutes, they were talking about possible places for Ashley's gap year. After averting a potential catastrophe during a health inspection, I was promoted to shift supervisor at work. A little celebration was thrown for me by my coworkers, who signed a card and produced a homemade cake. It meant more to me than any praise I had ever received at home when my boss, Sarah, called me aside and said, "You're going places, kid. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Everything changed once again yesterday. As usual, I went to my grandparents' house after closing the cafe. They looked at each other during our chat as if they were nervous. "Audrey," Grandpa started after clearing his throat. "We need to tell you something." I was astounded by what they disclosed next. As it happens, they are not the humiliatingly impoverished relatives Linda had always talked about. They had put their meager resources in a number of software startups after Mom severed their relationship. They decided to continue living simply in their comfortable home even if those investments had paid off handsomely. Grandpa stated, "Your mother left us because she felt we were too poor, too beneath her," using a headshake. "The irony is, we're probably wealthier than she is now. We just don't feel the need to show it off." Grandma said, "We've been waiting for the right moment to help you. And with graduation coming up, this seems perfect." Everything they told me is still being processed by me. I have more to say, but I must exercise caution in what I do next. 2 weeks remain until graduation, and Linda has been hinting about a large family celebration. For Ashley, of course. To celebrate Ashley's academic accomplishments, she has already reserved a classy restaurant and invited all of their friends. After I graduate, I'll provide another update. My grandparents claimed they had something planned, and judging by their smiles, I can tell it will be something important. I have a feeling that this day will be remembered by everyone in the family. Second update. The graduation ceremony proceeded according to plan. My step-parents hardly gave a cheer when they mentioned my name as valedictorian. However, they cheered and yelled like if Ashley had just won an Olympic medal when she crossed the stage. Then the shocking news arrived. Linda virtually bounced in her seat when she said, "Girls, we have exciting news. We're celebrating graduation in Hawaii." Over breakfast the following morning. Despite everything, my heart briefly felt better, but I should have known better. You understand, right? Someone has to watch the house, and you have your job at the cafe. "Honey," Linda said to me, her voice brimming with phony pity. "We only got 3 tickets for us and Ashley." Ashley stirred her orange juice without even trying to disguise her smirk. "Don't worry, sis," she murmured, sounding overly kind. "I'll send you lots of pictures of me living my best life on the beach." I observed them loading their pricey bags into the taxi the following morning from our front door. Ashley turned around and gave a theatrical, enthusiastic wave. "I'll make sure to send you beautiful photos from Hawaii." With trembling hands, I took out my phone and dialed my grandparents as soon as the cab vanished around the corner. When I heard Grandma's voice, the tears I had been suppressing finally came out. They went to Hawaii without me. They just left me here like I'm nothing," I cried. Grandma said, "Oh, sweetheart," in a gentle yet forceful voice. "Come over right now. We'll have our own graduation celebration." Still blotting away my tears, I pulled onto their street and drove to their house. At that moment, I spotted something out of the ordinary. A brand new Mercedes C-Class automobile shining in the summer sun parked in their driveway. Next to their small house, it appeared totally out of place. I strolled up to their front door and inquired, "Whose car is that?" Grandpa held up a set of keys, and his eyes glowed. "Yours. Happy graduation, Audrey." I was certain I had misheard him, so I stood there with my mouth open. They clarified that they had been waiting for the ideal opportunity to prepare this surprise for weeks. We celebrated with a lovely handmade graduation meal while we spent the afternoon together. A banner that read, "Congratulations, graduate," was displayed throughout the dining room, and the table was arranged with their finest china. 2 weeks passed slowly. My phone would ring every night with a new alert: Ashley posing on various beaches, dining at fancy restaurants, or relaxing by infinity pools. The captions for each picture got more and more offensive: "Living my best life as someone serves coffee." The day of their return then arrived. I was in the living room, looking out the window while feigning to read a book. I couldn't help but smile as I watched their expressions play out in slow motion as the cab arrived. Mom was the first to notice. Ashley dropped her expensive beach bag on the concrete driveway after she stopped so suddenly that she was directly struck by her. Dad almost stumbled over them both when he was fumbling with their pricey matching luggage set. Linda's harsh, high-pitched voice echoed through the front glass. "What is that?" Her immaculately manicured finger was quivering a little as she pointed at the Mercedes as though it would bite her. I enjoyed every moment of their bewilderment as I walked slowly to the front door. They all turned to stare at me as if I were a ghost when I stepped onto the porch. With his face flushed from shock and the Hawaiian sun, Dad shouted, "Whose car is that?" As Ashley often did while flaunting her fancy purse straps, I twisted the keys around my finger. "Mine," I replied. Ashley barkingly laughed, but I could detect the doubt in her voice. "Yeah, right. Like you could afford that on your waitress salary." With every word I could manage, I said, "Actually, it was a graduation gift from Grandma and Grandpa." Linda's cheeks lost color so quickly that I feared she may pass out. "What?" "You know," I replied with a smirk, "your parents. The ones you were too embarrassed to talk to because they were too poor. Those grandparents?" I feared Dad could have whiplash because he turned to Linda so quickly. "Linda, call your parents, right now." When Mom took out her phone, her hand trembled. When my grandmother responded, she didn't even make an effort to be polite. She insisted, "Where did you get the money for that car?" Grandma's quiet, mildly amused voice could be heard over the phone. "Oh, hello to you too, dear. Enjoying your expensive vacation?" There was mayhem for the following few minutes. Everything would never be the same after family secrets were revealed. Third update. I had never been happier as I was during the final weeks of summer at my grandparents' place. Grandpa's humming as he read the newspaper and the aroma of Grandma's coffee would greet me each morning. No feeling like an unwanted shadow, no fighting for attention, no walking on eggshells, just tranquility. It was bittersweet to move to Princeton. I bid my grandparents farewell with a hug and vowed to phone them every day before leaving in my Mercedes with everything I possessed. I felt as though I was crossing a line between my old and new lives on the drive to New Jersey. Just 10 minutes from university, my grandparents had gotten me a lovely small apartment. It was nothing special, but it was far nicer than any dorm room. There were large windows, hardwood floors, and even a tiny balcony where I could study. Despite my objections, they persisted on paying the rent. However, I still desired some autonomy, so I took a part-time work at a nearby coffee shop. I didn't miss the irony, still serving coffee, but this time out of choice rather than obligation. I found myself making true friends for the first time in my life, and the majority of my coworkers were fellow students. In the best way conceivable, the first week of classes was overwhelming. I was simply another freshman figuring things out, not the unwanted extra. Without any ulterior motives or comparisons to others, my students asked me to study groups, and my lecturers genuinely seemed interested in what I had to say. About a month into the semester, Grandma called one Sunday afternoon with some intriguing news. She remarked, "Your parents arrived at our door yesterday." A beat skipped in my chest. What were they seeking? As usual, Grandma remarked. Linda was all smiles and phony excuses as she inquired about our financial status and made a reference to Ashley's impending birthday. Your father continued to scan the house, perhaps in an attempt to determine our wealth. How did you explain it to them? Holding my breath, I asked. The line was joined by Grandpa's voice. We informed them that we had already made a financial decision. Everything will go to you. When we brought up the trust fund we've established for your graduate education, you ought to have seen Linda's expression. I could see their faces. What was their reaction to that? Grandma laughed and said, "Let's just say Linda's smile didn't look so genuine after that." We requested that they not return. Additionally, Ashley had the audacity to send us a list of expensive cars that she would be open to receiving as a birthday present. Is it not unbelievable? I blocked all of their phone numbers and social media accounts that night, including Ashley's. I was prepared for the unexpected expressions of love and regret, as well as offers to start over as a family. However, I no longer required their type of family. Linda tried a fresh strategy the next week. She sent a long letter after somehow obtaining my new address, likely by looking through my grandparents' mail. It was filled with justifications that they would love to be a real family once more and that they never intended to hurt me. The P.S.'s request that I speak positively to my grandparents on Ashley's birthday was the most telling. After carrying the letter to my balcony, I ripped it into small fragments and allowed the wind to whisk them away. After that, I gave my grandparents a call and helped Grandma organize her garden for the upcoming spring for an hour. Real family feels like that. No comparisons, no stipulations, just love. I occasionally think about that young child who used to ask for her parents' affection as I sat in my constitutional law class, taking notes and truly enjoying the intricacy of the subject matter. Not only would she find love, but she would also find respect, support, and the ability to be herself. I wish I could tell her that. Here, Emma, my roommate, has grown to be my best friend. I was almost adopted by her large, devoted family in Massachusetts. They offered me to spend Thanksgiving break at their family's beach cottage last weekend. I almost started crying when Emma's mother gave me a hug and remarked, "There's always room for one more at our table." My study group most likely confirms our later meeting at the library when my phone softly buzzes in my pocket. Perhaps it's Jake, the adorable guy from my psychology class who persistently requests coffee, thankfully not in my cafe. I used to work as a barista, and my family situation is complex, but he doesn't care that we've been studying together lately. Now, everything is so normal, no drama, no incessant comparisons, no sense of inadequacy. It's just me, my education, my friends, and the bright future that lies ahead. I've begun researching law schools. For once, I feel like I can dream as large as I want, and Grandpa believes I'd be a fantastic lawyer. There probably won't be any further updates from me. I've closed this chapter of my life and am prepared to start a new one, this time according to my own wishes. I've discovered that it's acceptable when the family you pick is superior to the one you were born into. I appreciate everyone who has followed my journey. You have no idea how much your support has meant. If you find yourself in a similar circumstance, keep in mind that you should not allow someone to make you feel inadequate. You will be loved for who you are by the right people. I took back my house and left my mother homeless after she disowned me for not attending my sister's wedding. Hey Reddit, my mom's favorite was always clear when I was growing up. My younger sister Rachel, 37F, and I, 42F, are the children of my mother, Karen, 62F. It seemed as though I had vanished from the world the instant Rachel was born. I don't want to come across as theatrical, but this is the reality. My mother was naturally quite protective of Rachel because she was born underweight and ill. I get that it must have been frightening for her to have a sick kid, but Rachel was the only child that Karen cared for, rather than merely the family's baby. Rachel received royal treatment. Her needs, wants, and moods were the center of attention. For example, Mom would hand-feed Rachel until she was well into middle school since she disliked eating by herself. Mom would simply complete any school projects or homework for Rachel. No questions asked. Mom allowed Rachel to stay at home if she didn't feel like going to school. And then there was me. I had clothes, food, and other essentials, so I wasn't completely disregarded, but I was alone emotionally. Unless it had to do with Rachel, Mom never truly cared about me. Mom was preoccupied at a spa and forgot about a dentist appointment I had when I was around 10 years old. After hours of waiting outside the school, a family friend saw me and offered to drive me home. My mother pretended it wasn't a huge thing when I returned. "Oh, I thought you'd figure it out," she simply said. The only person who actually saw me was my father, Michael. May he rest in peace. He wasn't home as much as I would have liked because he worked so much, but when he was, he tried his best. When Karen and Rachel weren't there, Dad and I would go out for movies or ice cream. He would give me extra cash for birthdays or school outings, but he would urge me not to tell my mother. In retrospect, I believe he was attempting to compensate me for feeling so unnoticed. But Dad could not deny the favoritism no matter how hard he tried. Everything was always better for Rachel. I had to save money or work for what I desired. Rachel, however, only needed to ask, and it would materialize. I requested a bike one Christmas, and Rachel made a last-minute request for the same item. Rachel received a brand new, gleaming bike beneath the tree on Christmas morning. I received some socks. "You're older," Mom responded when I inquired why. "You can get one for yourself by saving money." However, it was more than just material possessions. Rachel's happiness was Karen's obsession. Mom would move quickly to resolve whatever small problem Rachel was having, such as a friend not texting her back or receiving a poor grade. I quickly learned not to bother going to her for anything, though, as she would tell me to stop being so dramatic, or figure it out like an adult, whenever I was upset about something. Of course Rachel took it all in. Why wouldn't she? She was living the dream since Mom took care of everything for her, so she didn't have to do anything. Rachel eventually stopped learning even the most fundamental life skills. She was incapable of managing her own schedule, cooking, or even cleaning. Rachel was totally reliant on her mother since she protected her from everything. I didn't know how toxic the dynamic was until high school. Mom would complete Rachel's schoolwork after she would sob to her about how difficult her lessons were. Mom pleaded with the principal to have Rachel's grades modified after she failed high school, accusing the teachers of failing to recognize her unique needs. Naturally, it didn't succeed, but it demonstrated the lengths Karen will go to in order to shield Rachel from responsibility of any kind. However, I was supposed to be self-sufficient. I had to work things out on my own if I had trouble in school. I had to use the money I earned from babysitting if I wanted to participate in extracurricular activities. And Karen would tell me, "You're the older sister. You need to set an example," if I ever ventured to voice my displeasure. I was eager to be out of high school by the time I graduated. I never looked back after enrolling at a college in a different city. I never made a better choice than to move away. I was able to breathe for the first time. I didn't have to compete for Karen's attention or continually compare myself to Rachel. I might simply be myself. Rachel, meanwhile, remained at home and didn't leave until she was 26 years old and married. Karen continued to be involved in her life even at that point, phoning her 5 times a day to inquire about topics like, "What did you eat?" or "How is your hubby doing?" She even unexpectedly came up to bring Rachel groceries or clean her house, even though Rachel and her husband were more than capable of handling those tasks on their own. For my part, I was going about my life. I obtained a job after graduating from college and began constructing my future. Dad kept in touch with me by giving me frequent phone calls and coming to see me when he could. Not so much Karen. She would occasionally comment on my Facebook posts or send me a birthday text, but that was about it. I honestly didn't give a damn. Her unrelenting criticism and partiality no longer burdened me, and I was joyful. In hindsight, I believe Karen's fixation on Rachel stemmed from a desire for control. She never allowed Rachel to grow up because she wanted her to always be in need of her. I had to fend for myself after being thrown out of the nest early. Although it was painful at the time, I now consider it a blessing. While Rachel became totally dependent on Karen, I learned to stand on my own 2 feet. The dynamic remained the same even after I left. Karen was Rachel's facilitator, I was the forgotten child, and Rachel was the golden child. Some things never change, which is humorous. Not funny haha, but funny in a depressing manner. But everything did 11 years ago. At first, Dad's frequent coughing didn't seem like a huge concern. He blamed it on a recalcitrant cold or allergies. However, he didn't get better as the weeks stretched into months. He actually grew worse. He was usually exhausted, breathless, and simply not himself. Nevertheless, he continued to labor because he was a selfless, industrious man who always put the needs of others before his own. Karen didn't appear to notice at all. She was too preoccupied with her daily schedule of yoga sessions, spa visits, and whatever else occupied her time. After her first marriage ended, Rachel was back at home by that point. She didn't appear to be really worried about Dad's health, and she wasn't working either. They seemed unwilling to face the inconvenience of admitting that something was amiss. I was trying to keep some distance from all the family dysfunction while establishing my career in a distant place. During our frequent phone conversations, I could sense that something wasn't right. He sounded more worn out and weaker. He dismissed my question about whether he had seen a doctor, claiming to be all right. I knew he wasn't though. When he eventually went to the hospital following an especially severe coughing spell, things reached a breaking point. A serious lung infection was the diagnosis. When I learned, I immediately dropped everything and ran home. I was appalled when I arrived. Dad was laying in bed by himself, looking so weak and ill. Rachel and Karen? They were out getting manicures. Karen pretended to be shocked to see me when they returned. She even attempted to give me a hug, but I refused. When I questioned her why she wasn't with Dad, she said that she had errands to run. Both had recently had their nails done and were carrying shopping bags, so it was clear they had just left the spa. I spent as much time as I could with Dad when he was admitted to the hospital. Every now and then, Karen would stop by, but only for a few minutes. Rachel? She said it was too hard for her to see him in that state, and she hardly turned there at all. I was balancing everything at the same time, including communicating with doctors, controlling his medicine, and attempting to make him comfortable. On most nights, I even slept in a chair by his bed. It was frustrating that Karen didn't participate. It's not like she was too busy to be there because she didn't work. However, she pretended that going to the hospital was a huge hassle. The day she stated, "He's in good hands with the nurses," will always stick in my memory. Should I just sit there, or what? Yes, Karen, supporting your husband is exactly what you're meant to do. Dad was released from the hospital after a week. We hired a nurse to assist at home because he still required round-the-clock care. Karen was expected to take charge and assume greater responsibilities, yet she continued to be untrustworthy. She would leave for hours to run errands, only to return with shopping bags, or she would fail to give him his medications on time. On one occasion, she chose to stop at the salon before picking up an oxygen tank for him. I had already made arrangements for someone else to deliver it by the time she arrived home. Rachel wasn't any better. She said she avoided Dad completely because she couldn't bear to see him in such a vulnerable state. She spent much of her time in her room watching TV or browsing on her phone. She even went on vacation with her friends during one of Dad's worst bouts, leaving me to manage everything by myself. In the end, I resigned my job to care for Dad full-time. To be honest, I didn't want to leave him alone with Karen or Rachel, and I didn't trust them to do it. He was worthy of better. In order to keep him from feeling lonely, I prepared his meals, assisted him with his physical therapy, and made sure he had company. I loved him, so even though it was exhausting, I would do it all over again if I had to. As Dad's health deteriorated, Karen did make an attempt to work harder, but it was too late. She would sit next to him, but she would be glued to her phone, either talking to Rachel or posting on social media. It seemed as though she was unable to fully focus on him. Rachel only arrived after being coerced by Karen, and even then, she would excuse herself and depart after a short while. A few months later, Dad died. The nurse, I, and a few of his friends who had come to bid him farewell were all around him. Rachel and Karen. They weren't present. Rachel was out with friends, and Karen had gone to some sort of wellness retreat. When it became apparent that Dad was running low on time, I contacted both of them, but they did not answer. The funeral went by quickly. I was tired and heartbroken, but I still had to put up with the bullshit from Rachel and Karen. As though she hadn't been ignoring all the warning signals for months, Karen talked to her friends about how unexpected Dad's death was for the majority of the funeral. Rachel made a huge show of crying, but it felt so forced. She hadn't given a damn when it counted. Dad's attorney called me a few weeks after the funeral to discuss his will. I was hoping for a tiny inheritance or a memento, but nothing more. However, I was taken aback when I met with the attorney. Dad had bequeathed the house, his savings, and his assets to me. Rachel and Karen received nothing. Given how little his wife and youngest daughter cared for him, I could only imagine how much anguish Dad must have been going through in his last months. He expressed his appreciation for everything I'd done for him by leaving everything to me. It caused a firestorm, though. When Karen and Rachel learned, they were furious. In fact, Rachel yelled at the attorney, stating that she could never be subjected to this treatment by her father. Karen called and insisted that I give them a piece of the inheritance. I declined. For the sake of my sanity, I disconnected from Rachel and Karen. Their sense of entitlement was draining. I eventually met my husband after relocating to the city where I was employed and concentrating on starting again. We relocated abroad for his work, got married, and had a baby. To be honest, I didn't feel the need to tell Karen or Rachel about it because it was a new beginning. After a few years, I became a mother to my daughter. Karen appeared at my place out of the blue. It was unexpected to see her at my door as I hadn't spoken to her in years. She appeared more worn out and less put together. She sobbed, expressed regret, and expressed her want to be involved in my daughter's life. She even acknowledged that she felt bad about the way she raised me. She said she just wanted to make amends because she had been living with remorse ever since Dad died. Although I must admit that I didn't trust her, I chose to give her a chance. It was all right for a time. Karen would occasionally send gifts and make video calls to see how my daughter was doing. For once it felt normal. Then, predictably, the hints began. I thought it would go away, so I disregarded Karen when she casually said how hard life had been for her since I took everything, or how she was having financial difficulties. Karen gave me a call around a month ago. The fact that she seemed enthusiastic made me uneasy right away because Karen doesn't call unless she needs something. She struck up a discussion by inquiring about my spouse and daughter, which was already strange. Then she revealed the shocking news that Rachel was getting married once more. As you recall, Rachel's first marriage ended almost a year later. She never really put her life back on track after moving back in with Karen. Rachel and I hadn't spoken for more than 10 years, so this news was unexpected. Karen talked endlessly on Rachel's significance of this wedding, how it was a new beginning for her, and how pleased the family would be. I congratulated her, was courteous, and assumed that was the end of it. But obviously not. Karen went on to say something like, "You know, Rachel has had a really difficult time organizing this wedding within her budget. After everything she's been through, she deserves a lovely day." I knew where this was going, so I said nothing. "I was hoping you could help out with the expenses," she finally added. "Considering everything your father left you, it's the least you can do." I was astounded. To begin with, Rachel and I don't even communicate. Second, what level of entitlement is required to demand payment from someone who isn't even invited to the wedding? Indeed, Karen made it apparent that I was not invited. "Oh, we assumed you wouldn't want to travel with a baby, but of course you're welcome to come," Karen said in an attempt to backtrack when I brought this up. "Your sister is getting married, so you don't need an invitation." I bluntly told her no. I had nothing to pay for. She attempted to place the blame on me by claiming that I had an obligation to assist Rachel as the older sister. She also mentioned Dad's wealth, saying that while Rachel was struggling, I was hoarding the family fortune. I informed her that Rachel and I were not romantically involved and advised her to get in touch with Rachel directly if she needed assistance. Rachel, predictably, never did. Karen didn't accept rejection. She kept bringing up the same point in her voicemails and texts over the course of the following few weeks. I was disappointing Rachel, I was self-centered, and I didn't care about my family. "If you don't help, it will ruin Rachel's big day and everyone will know it's your fault," she even stated. The problem is that Rachel and Karen were behaving as though I owed them money. But when I needed assistance, where were they? I was the one who put everything on hold to take care of Dad while he was ill. While everybody continued living their lives, I was the one who remained by his side. And now they wanted me to come through and save the day after years of silence? Not at all. Karen made matters worse by asserting that Rachel had already reserved the space and paid deposits for musicians, caterers, and decorations. Since the invitations had already been sent, she claimed that canceling everything would make the family look foolish. If they couldn't afford it, how did they plan all of this? I asked her. What did she say? "You were what we needed." That was the last straw. I informed Karen that because I wasn't providing them any money, she could solve the problem on her own. She broke down in tears and threatened to cut me out of her life if I didn't help. "You already treated me like I didn't exist," I responded, laughing. "What makes a difference?" I hung up and blocked her after that. Although he cautioned that there would be criticism from extended family, my husband supported my choice. He was correct. Some family members contacted me and said that since family is family, I should be the bigger person and lend a hand. However, Where was all of this concern when Karen and Rachel were treating me like trash? I disregarded them and refused to back down. I haven't replied, and to be honest, I don't intend to, but Karen left me a voicemail with the words, "If you can live with ruining your sister's wedding, then I guess you're not the person I thought you were. Too much of my life has been devoted to going above and beyond for folks who don't value it. I'm finished." I reached my breaking point after the wedding drama. In the house Dad left me, Karen and Rachel had been living rent-free for more than a decade. A part of me believed that especially after Dad's passing, it would be simpler to avoid the drama of evicting them. But as time went on, I came to see that they were not appreciative of me, did not respect me, and had no plans to ever be respectable. Let's go back a little. Karen and Rachel were furious that Dad left everything to me when his will was read. Karen said that because she had lived there for many years, it was her house. Rachel screamed about how unjust it was during her tantrum. In actuality though, neither of them was worthy of a dime. When they couldn't even bother to come up most of the time, Dad left me the house because he could see how much I cared for him in his last months. "I see you, and I appreciate you," was how he expressed his gratitude. I allowed them to remain in the house even after I inherited everything. I had the hope that they might change. However, Karen never once offered to pay me rent and instead rented out one of the rooms to pay for her own costs, acting as though the house was hers. I was treated like a villain by Rachel, who told the rest of the family that I had tricked Dad into excluding her from the will. They didn't try to patch things up between them. I finally came to the conclusion that enough was enough. I needed to reclaim what was properly mine since they had stayed too long. "I was hoping you could help out with the expenses," she finally added. "Considering everything your father left you, it's the least you can do." I was astounded. I don't even speak to Rachel, to start. Second, what level of entitlement is required to demand payment from someone who isn't even invited to the wedding? Indeed, Karen made it apparent that I was not invited. "Oh, we assumed you wouldn't want to travel with a baby, but of course, you're welcome to come," Karen said in an attempt to retract her statement when I brought this up. "Your sister is getting married, so you don't need an invitation." I bluntly told her no, I had nothing to pay for. She attempted to place the blame on me by claiming that I had an obligation to assist Rachel as the older sister. She also mentioned Dad's wealth, saying that while Rachel was struggling, I was hoarding the family fortune. I informed her that Rachel and I were not romantically involved and advised her to get in touch with Rachel directly if she needed assistance. Rachel, predictably, never did. Karen didn't accept rejection. She kept bringing up the same point in her voicemails and texts over the course of the following few weeks. I was disappointing Rachel, I was self-centered, and I didn't care about my family. "If you don't help, it will ruin Rachel's big day and everyone will know it's your fault," she even stated. The problem is that Rachel and Karen behaved as though I owed them money. But when I needed assistance, where were they? I was the one who put everything on hold to take care of Dad while he was ill. While everybody continued living their lives, I was the one who remained by his side. And now they wanted me to come through and save the day after years of silence? Not at all. Karen made matters worse by asserting that Rachel had already reserved the space and paid deposits for musicians, caterers, and decorations. Since the invitations had already been sent, she claimed that canceling everything would make the family look foolish. If they couldn't afford it, how did they plan all of this, I asked her. What did she say? "You were what we needed." That was the last straw. I informed Karen that because I wasn't providing them any money, she could solve the problem on her own. She broke down in tears and threatened to cut me out of her life if I didn't help. "You already treated me like I didn't exist," I responded, laughing. "What makes a difference?" I hung up and blocked her after that. Although he cautioned that there would be criticism from extended family, my husband supported my choice. He was correct. Some family members contacted me and said that since family is family, I should be the bigger person and lend a hand. However, where was all of this concern when Karen and Rachel were treating me like trash? I disregarded them and refused to back down. I haven't replied, and to be honest, I don't intend to, but Karen left me a voicemail with the words, "If you can live with ruining your sister's wedding, then I guess you're not the person I thought you were. Too much of my life has been devoted to going above and beyond for folks who don't value it. I'm finished." I reached my breaking point after the wedding drama. In the house Dad left me, Karen and Rachel had been living rent-free for more than a decade. A part of me believed that especially after Dad's passing, it would be simpler to avoid the drama of evicting them. But as time went on, I came to see that they were not appreciative of me, did not respect me, and had no plans to ever be respectable. Let's go back a little. Karen and Rachel were furious that Dad left everything to me when his will was read. Karen said that because she had lived there for many years, it was her house. Rachel screamed about how unjust it was during her tantrum. In actuality, though, neither of them was worthy of a dime. When they couldn't even bother to come up most of the time, Dad left me the house because he could see how much I cared for him in his last months. "I see you, and I appreciate you," was how he expressed his gratitude. I allowed them to remain in the house even after I inherited everything. I had the hope that they might change. However, Karen never once offered to pay me rent and instead rented out one of the rooms to pay for her own costs, acting as though the house was hers. I was treated like a villain by Rachel, who told the rest of the family that I had tricked Dad into excluding her from the will. They certainly enjoyed living in a house they didn't pay for, but they didn't try to patch things up. After Karen's absurd request that I cover Rachel's wedding costs and the constant attempts at manipulation, I finally had enough. I had an eviction notice prepared after I called my attorney. Karen went insane when she got it. "You can't evict me," she yelled when she called me. "I call this place home. I've spent 45 years here." I politely told her that she had 30 days to leave the house and that it was legally mine. Naturally, Rachel threw herself into the conflict. She accused me of being greedy and callous, calling me every possible insult in the book. "I just cared about Dad to get the inheritance," she said. It was absurd. I'm the terrible guy, even though she was the one who hardly ever saw Dad while he was dying. Karen did everything she could to get me to reconsider. She pretended to be tough at first, adding, "I dare you to kick me out." She then softened, saying that the house was all she had left and that she was too old to start again. "I'm not going anywhere." As if it wasn't the place I should have been collecting rent on for years, she even sobbed about how she had been renting out a room to make ends meet. It didn't work. Her attempt to guilt-trip me by asking, "What would your dad think if he saw you throwing your mother out on the street?" was the last straw. "Dad left me the house for a reason," I explained to her. "Perhaps he would still be alive if you had given him even half the attention you gave to spa sessions." I realized that was harsh, but I had had enough of sugarcoating things. Karen had to deal with the repercussions of her decisions. The eviction wasn't warmly received by Rachel either. She made a huge deal out of telling Karen to temporarily move in with her. She boasted to every one of her relatives over the phone that she was supporting Karen and that she didn't require anything from me. She seemed to want a round of applause for performing the absolute minimum, and it was all very performative. On the 26th day of the 30-day notice period, Karen left. I didn't even make an effort to appear. To oversee the transition, I engaged a property manager. I had the house refurbished and cleaned after it was vacant. I made the trusting decision to rent it to the brother of a family friend. Knowing that the house would eventually be occupied by individuals who valued it was a pleasant feeling. In the meantime, because I wouldn't pay, Rachel's elaborate wedding plans fell through. She was forced to move from an elegant lakefront location to a municipal hall. It seems that this embarrassed a number of people in their social circle, and Rachel's fiancé wasn't pleased either. He didn't even want a large wedding, it turns out. Shortly after Karen moved in with Rachel, I began to hear rumors of trouble in paradise because Rachel had assured him she would find a way to pay for it, which was obviously code for "my sister will pay." Having his mother-in-law as a frequent visitor to the residence did not sit well with Rachel's husband. As usual, Karen felt compelled to interfere in their lives. She would make fun of Rachel's cooking, or remark on how Rachel's husband managed the house, and overall be a pain in the neck. Some family members have attempted to use guilt-tripping to get me to forgive Rachel and Karen. They insist that I should have allowed Karen to remain in the house and that I have gone too far. But to be honest, I don't give a damn. I don't care about these people's thoughts anymore because they remained silent when I was being tormented. Let's go on to the final update now. I believed that I would finally be at peace after Karen moved in with Rachel. I cut off most of the toxic relatives who tried to guilt-trip me into forgiving Karen and Rachel, rented out the house, and concentrated on my family. I must admit that I was relieved when I didn't hear from them for a time. Naturally, though, that didn't last. I received a contact from a mutual relative inquiring whether I had heard anything about Karen and Rachel's situation around 2 months after the eviction. I hadn't, and I wasn't sure I cared, to be honest. But I had to ask since I was so curious. They told me things that were both frustrating and, dare I say it, gratifying. Chris, Rachel's husband, apparently had enough of Karen's interference and issued Rachel a final ultimatum: either she leaves or I leave. Due to the wedding fiasco, Rachel was already at odds with him. Do you recall that she had promised him a lavish wedding, which I was supposed to pay for? Rachel felt ashamed in front of her friends and his family when they were forced to settle for a modest town hall ceremony when things didn't work out. There was a lot of friction in their relationship as a result of her disregarding Chris's warnings not to overextend financially. Things only got worse when Karen moved into their house. Chris's cuisine, his parenting skills, they have a toddler, and even his communication with Rachel were all criticized by Karen. Ironically, given her own financial mess, she would advise them on how to handle their money. For a while, Chris tried to put up with it, but after one very heated argument in which Karen accused him of not being man enough to care for his family, he told Rachel that it was either him or Karen. Rachel pleaded with him to change his mind, but he refused. The worst part is that Karen didn't go out in silence. She lost it when Rachel informed her of Chris's ultimatum. She also threatened to remove Rachel from her will, which was a pointless threat given that Karen had nothing to leave behind, and accused Rachel of abandoning her like everyone else. After they got into a heated dispute, Rachel, who was probably embarrassed and upset, advised Karen to work it out on her own. Where has Karen disappeared to? Not surprisingly, she made an attempt to get in touch with me. She asked me if I would think about allowing her to return to the house via email. Yes, an email, as I had blocked her on all other platforms. She wrote on how harsh life had been to her and how, as a mother, she had always tried her hardest. She even attempted to present it as a chance for us to mend and re-establish our bond. I didn't even think to answer. Her deceptive strategies were now just depressing. Karen attempted to use guilt tripping to persuade some extended family members to take her in after I failed to respond. The majority of them flatly refused, most likely due to their observation of her methods. A distant cousin consented to let Karen stay for a short while, but she was asked to leave after just 3 weeks. Evidently, the cousin had had enough of her persistent complaints and demanding demeanor. Rachel is currently coping with the consequences of her choices. Although Chris stayed with her, their relationship is apparently in very bad shape. Chris has been withdrawing both financially and emotionally as a result of the wedding costs, Karen's turmoil, and Rachel's inability to accept responsibility for anything. Rachel has been telling everyone that he, not her, is the issue, even though he even recommended couples counseling. According to what I've heard, Rachel has been complaining to her family about how unfair it is that Dad gave me everything. She said that none of this would have occurred if I had simply divided the inheritance. She intentionally omits the part where she and Karen treated me like a monster for caring about Dad and disregarded him in his last months. With them, it's always someone else's fault. I've been doing okay in spite of their turmoil. The best choice I've ever made was to lease out the house. The space is truly loved and respected by the renters, a lovely family. I now have financial stability and can invest in my daughter's future thanks to the rental income. My spouse and I are doing well in our jobs, and we have begun preparing for a long overdue family getaway. Regarding Karen and Rachel, they have already made their decisions and are now dealing with the fallout. Rachel is trapped in a marriage that is about to end, while Karen continues to move between relatives. I simply don't care about them anymore. I don't mean any harm. The most liberating thing of all has been realizing that their turmoil is no longer my problem. I appreciate you reading and all of your help along the process, Reddit. Thank you for everything, and be careful. My family didn't invite me to the reunion, so I showed up unannounced, shared my engagement news, and finally took a stand for myself. I am the youngest of 3 siblings and I am 28 years old. As a child, it was clear that I was the odd one out. There was always an obvious favorite, or favorites, I might say, among my parents. With their stable careers, large homes, ideal marriages, and those cute Christmas card families, my brother, 35M, and sister, 32F, were everything parents could boast about. My sister is a lawyer of some sort, and my brother works in finance. Both of them reside in lovely suburban communities with spouses who complement their professional backgrounds. Every family gathering is an opportunity for my parents to brag about their kids to friends and family. And then me. 2 years ago, I left my corporate position to launch a modest business of which I am really proud. I'm content with my life and earn enough money to live comfortably. Together, my 5-year boyfriend and I share a rental home. Even though we're not making a lot of money, we're doing okay. But my folks had a different perspective. Stable and traditional are terms they frequently use, and I suppose I don't suit that description. The subtle jabs about my hobby job and remarks about how much better my life would be if I had persisted with a 9-to-5 have become unimportant to me. On the surface, we've always been courteous, but the tension has been for years. I didn't believe it was this horrible though. I came across my cousin's tale on Instagram a few weeks ago while perusing the platform. She appeared to be at a large family reunion. With all of the extended family gathered in one house, it was the type of gathering that my family often hosts a few times a year. There were my sister and brother, grinning with their partners. Except for me, my aunt, uncle and cousins were all tagged. I initially believed that I might have missed the group conversation. Perhaps the invitation got lost in all of my alerts. I sent my siblings an SMS. While my sister responds more slowly, She doesn't entirely ignore me, and my brother typically responds right away. Nothing happened for hours. I began to have the strange sensation in my chest that occurs when you know something is amiss but are reluctant to acknowledge it just yet. I called my mother the following day. I asked her how she was doing and if there had been a get-together, using a conversational tone. For far too long, the phone line went silent. She said, "Oh, the reunion? I didn't think you'd want to come. You're always so busy with your little business and everything." I took a moment to answer. I questioned her about why she thought I wouldn't want to attend. After all, my family is my family. She seemed to be trying to shrug the discussion aside as her voice became lighter. "We just didn't want to bother you, sweetheart. Besides, you've missed a few events before." Indeed, but primarily due to work, and not without informing them. As I persisted, it became increasingly evident that my absence was not an accident. They hadn't forgotten me. They had declined my invitation. Something about hearing it firsthand made my stomach plummet, and I'm not sure why. I hung up and sat there listening to the exchange again. I had previously experienced exclusion. Plans for many of the holidays seemed to center around my brothers' or sisters' families. I used to convince myself that it wasn't deliberate. Perhaps they didn't consider how I would fit into their plans because I didn't have children or a conventional lifestyle. I was unable to ignore it any longer, though, as I sat in my peaceful kitchen and watched my boyfriend work in the other room. This was intentional. My partner was incensed on my behalf when I told him, "You need to go anyway. They don't get to decide you don't belong there," he replied. He was correct. Why should I allow them to act as though I don't exist? I was tired of being treated like an afterthought by my family. Whether they liked it or not, I deserved to be a member of my family. The plan began to take shape at that point. I had been holding on to one card for weeks, and I hadn't played it yet. 2 weeks prior, my boyfriend and I had become engaged. I wanted to do it face to face with the people who should be concerned about my life, but we hadn't notified anyone. Now, though, I had my own motives. I would remind them of my presence if they were considering excluding me from my family. This time, they wouldn't ignore me. I made the decision to arrive without warning. I declined my boyfriend's, bless him, invitation to accompany me. I had to take care of this on my own. We devised a contingency plan, and he agreed to drive up and grab me if things didn't work out. If they didn't want me there, I would arrive and then depart, but not before telling them what I had to say. In order to make it appear as though I had always meant to attend, I prepared a large quantity of snacks to bring with me in the days before. For me, this wasn't about proving myself, even if my partner insisted that I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I had to be there for myself. I had had enough of fading away because they didn't think I belonged. I promised myself that if I had to leave, I would go, smile, and share my news. Although I had no control on their feelings toward me, I did have influence over how I responded to it. I refused to let them treat me like an outsider for once. Additionally, I would at least have closure if things didn't work out. First update. It took slightly over 3 hours to go to my folks' house. The majority of time was spent on how to appear unimpressed, as if I had simply happened to stop by since, well, I was aware of the family reunion. It seemed a bit ironic given why I was there, but the box of handmade cookies on the passenger seat smelled sweet and soothing. After checking the place twice, my partner assured me that he would be prepared to come get me if I needed a way out. I promised to keep him informed. The house was filled with automobiles parked on the lawn and along the driveway when I eventually pulled there. I inhaled deeply, picked up the treat box, and made my way to the front door. From within came the sounds of music, laughter, and clinking dishes. I stepped through the slightly open door. The noise stopped as soon as I entered. I knew they had all seen me without having to glance up. I sensed dozens of eyes swinging toward me as conversations broke off in the middle of sentences. My mother recovered first. She hurried over, her voice too happy and high. "Oh, you succeeded? How unexpected?" She merely patted my arm and moved away without giving me an embrace. Her eyes did not meet the phony warmth in her voice. There was an uneasy shuffle of movement in the room. People resumed their talks, but things had changed. Before my brother vanished into the kitchen, I saw him and my sister looking at each other across the room. Standing with her husband, my sister gave me a quick look before launching back into a boisterous discussion with other aunts. Across the room, I saw my cousin, the same person whose Instagram tale had given me the hint. Despite her apparent astonishment at seeing me, she nodded and smiled slightly. On the dining table, I set my package of goodies next to a spread of what appeared to be catered cuisine. Nobody even looked at my belongings. It hurt when I heard an aunt whispering to someone by the hallway, "Did they not invite her on purpose?" While I was moving through the room, I slipped by them into the living room after pausing to check my phone. My cousin drew me aside a few minutes later. She lowered her voice and looked over her shoulder. They didn't think you'd come. Your parents, well, they didn't think you'd fit in here anymore. In spite of her apparent remorse, she said, "Fit in," as if I were a shattered puzzle piece in a family portrait. My dad was by the drink station when I left, but I can't recall what I muttered in response. I made the decision to give it a try. I questioned him why no one had told me about the reunion. As he filled the glass, he hardly raised his head to say, "We thought you'd be happier doing your own thing." The words hung thick in the air, yet it wasn't unkind. Since it was clear that I would not receive answers, I didn't press him any further. I didn't feel like making small chat with relatives who were acting as though they didn't see me, and the box of cookies I had brought was still unopened on the table. But it wasn't all bad. A few of my younger cousins approached to greet me. I felt a little better when they inquired about my company and mentioned that they had seen some of my work online. Someone cared about my life, at least. Once more, there was a bustle of talk in the room, and I sat down close to the corner and browsed through my phone idly. I simply needed time to think on what to do next. I didn't want to cause a scene. My sister's voice broke through the commotion at that point. Her face was beaming with joy as she clapped her hands. The room fell silent as she said, "Everyone, I have some news to share." And everyone's eyes shifted to her as she revealed she was expecting her second child. Cheers broke out. As everyone applauded, a few uncles made a joke about placing wagers on whether it would be a girl or a boy. My mother appeared as though she could burst with joy. Nobody gave me a sidelong glance. As I stood there, I heard the laughter and congrats. I seemed to have vanished once more. As usual, the same motif. The fact that I was present was irrelevant. The fact that I had arrived even though I hadn't been invited didn't matter. They would always treat me like an outsider and glorify my siblings. Something broke inside of me. I'm not sure if it was my dad's departure, the rumors I had heard, or the fact that my cookies were still unopened. Perhaps it was everything. I took a glass off the drink table and gave it a loud fork clink. Heads turned to face me as the room gradually became quiet once more. After enjoying the attention, my sister became irritated. I choose to disregard it. "Well," I continued steadily, "I have something to say too, since we're sharing big news." Second update. As soon as I walked in, the place was silent once more. All eyes were on me, all conversations halted, and forks froze in mid-air. But compared to when my sister revealed her pregnancy, the attention wasn't as enthusiastic or welcoming. I felt as though I had disturbed a sacred item. Despite my racing heart, I stood up and held my hand firm. "I just wanted to share some news of my own," I said. I raised my left hand to reveal the engagement ring, which sparkled in the light from the dining room. No one responded for a second when I said, "I got engaged 2 weeks ago?" The silence was then broken by a few dispersed claps. From the side of the room, my little cousins, God bless them, cheered me on. The rest of the room remained motionless, as though they were still processing it, but a courteous uncle gave a nod of assent. Before forcing a faint smile, the kind she typically saved for strangers, my mom's face fell. "Why didn't you inform us earlier?" Her voice sounded more like an accusation than one of enthusiasm or inquiry. Her gaze flicked to the ring and then returned to me. I didn't think twice. I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I wasn't sure you'd care. I wasn't invited here, after all. I assumed you no longer wanted me to be involved in family matters." Discomfort spread throughout the room. Pretending to check their phones, people looked at each other or moved in their seats. After standing by the kitchen doorway, my brother moved forward and pushed off the frame. His voice was sharp, and his face was crimson. "You are not the focus of this. You have to put yourself first at all times." There was a response to that. A few whispered to themselves, "Not now." Yet I could sense that everyone was observing. My brother's crossed arms and intense gaze made it difficult for me to speak. "So I did." "Really?" I shot back. "You all seem fine without me, but I don't remember getting an invitation to this little party. My engagement is as significant as the news of anybody else." The room became silent once more at that point. My sister refused to look at me since she was still blushing from her own news. My mother's courteous facade was beginning to crumble, and her face changed to one that was more recognizable. Annoyance. I saw her take a breath, likely to speak, but before she could, a voice broke the silence. One of my relatives remarked, "She has every reason to be angry." Her arms were folded as she sat close to the couch's edge. "What did you expect if you didn't invite her? That she would simply remain silent indefinitely?" Some people turned to look at my cousin. From the dining table came another voice. Yes, it's not as though she's incorrect. I sensed a change for a split second. Although it wasn't much, it was sufficient. The fissures were visible. My mom shifted the topic, as she always does when she's cornered, likely understanding she was losing control of the situation. Well, let's not forget how exciting it is that your sister is having another baby, she remarked, bringing a smile back to her voice. The family is thrilled to hear that. There was a deflection, so clear. She was unable to give me this moment, not even for a brief moment. Immediately, the focus returned to my sister, who grinned broadly and thanked everyone once more for their congrats. My brother gave me a cocky grin like he was saying, "See? I was done." I took my phone out of my pocket and texted my lover, "Come get me," without uttering a word. I wasn't going to stay any longer than absolutely necessary. I picked up my handbag and made my way to the front entrance. Two of my younger relatives hurried after me, apologizing and inquiring as to where I was going. One of them hugged me and whispered, "You don't deserve this?" I returned the hug and assured her that I would be all right. It wasn't loud, but it was loud enough to hear my dad murmur, "Drama queen," from the side of the room as I was putting on my coat. I hesitated for a moment, but I didn't look back. Rather, I opened the door and went outdoors. The cool air cleared the heaviness in my chest and struck me like a jolt. One of my relatives came running out after me before I had gone halfway down the driveway. Her shoes crunched on the gravel as she jogged to catch up. "Hold on," she yelled. I paused and looked at her. She appeared embarrassed, almost as if she was at a loss for words. "I apologize," she blurted. "For everything. It was courageous. In there you defended yourself. That was not how you should have been treated." I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. I managed to say, "Thanks." Perhaps someone from inside asked what I was doing when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She rushed back toward the house after giving me one final pitying glance. After a few minutes, my boyfriend's vehicle arrived. I buckled my seatbelt, threw my purse on the seat and got in. I started crying as soon as I sensed the car moving. The tears flowed quickly and forcefully, like if I had been suppressing them for hours. My guy simply reached over and squeezed my hand without saying anything. As the trees beyond the window blurred by, I let it all out. The sobbing had subsided into soft sniffles by the time we drove onto the main road. Although I still felt raw and ashamed, there was also relief behind all of that. I hadn't just let it happen for the first time. I had raised my voice. Even if they didn't want to, I forced them to see me. Third update. At first, the only sound on the drive home was the hum of the road. As my fiancé drove, I gazed out the window, mentally reliving every moment of the recent reunion. I eventually opened up, discussing my brother's teasing, my dad's remark about my being a drama queen, my mother's disregard for me, and how my sister's pregnancy announcement had been the last straw. It all spilled out. With his palm resting on the gear shift, my fiancé listened and occasionally nodded. "You did the right thing," he added, looking over when I was done. "They have no right to declare you unimportant. We will proceed without requiring their consent." It was helpful to hear, yet I remained silent. My phone buzzed as we got close to home. I looked down. The cousin who had followed me out of the gathering had left me a message. "You were correct. For a long time, your parents have been discussing you behind your back." I straightened my posture. There was more to the message. "I apologize, but you must understand this. Your mother told everyone that your lack of a steady career makes you a disappointment. Additionally, she stated that your sister's announcement is far more significant than your engagement." It didn't seem fair to me. In an attempt to comprehend the words, I read them twice. I was still looking at the screen when I received a second message, this one containing screenshots. It came from a family catch-ups group chat, of which I had obviously been excluded. My mother's name was prominently displayed in one of the screenshots. I'm not sure why she would want to attend anyhow. She constantly makes things about herself and does her own thing. Giving up a real career to pretend to be a business owner? So self-centered. If nothing else, sister is leading a life of which we may be proud. My chest constricted. The subsequent screen grab was even worse. Since I didn't want her to show up and ruin the day with a dramatic story about her engagement, I honestly didn't notify her about the reunion. Who cares? She's not getting married first, after all. When the television came back to life, I sensed my fiancé looking at me. "What is it?" he inquired. "Proof," I muttered. I was still gazing at the screenshots when we arrived home. I entered my family group chat, which I had been kicked out of years ago and was only periodically added back in for important updates, and added myself back in. I wasn't sure if this was because I was angry, wounded, or incredulous. I sent the screenshots as soon as I noticed my name appeared in the chat. Just those receipts for everyone to see, nothing else. I typed, "Is this how you truly feel about me?" a few seconds later. I suppose I ought to have remained forgotten at that time. Setting my phone aside, I waited. It was not long before the responses began to pour in. First to enter, my brother said, "This was private. You're blowing things out of proportion and being dramatic as usual." My sister then asked, "What did you anticipate would happen if you shared this? For no apparent reason, you're making things worse. Give it up." Their texts appeared like fast fire as I watched them type one after the other. Before my mother's name was ultimately displayed, I gave them a minute to vent. Compared to the others, her message was longer. Those remarks were misconstrued. "I don't like you creating all this needless drama, and you're reading too much into things. You've been overly sensitive all along. Taken out of context?" I scribbled a response as I took up the phone once more. "I'm offended because this is not how any parent should discuss their child. This is your opinion of me, even though I wasn't invited to my own family's reunion?" My dad's name showed up in the chat for the first time, but he only typed a scene tag beneath my message instead of typing anything. I didn't stay to finish reading it. I threw my phone onto the couch and placed it on silent. Sitting beside me, my fiancé drew me in. However, my phone buzzed once again shortly after. One of my aunts sent me a private message saying, "I had no idea that any of this was going on. I sincerely apologize for the treatment you received. You're worthy of better." Another reply arrived a few minutes later, saying, "We're proud of you for standing up for yourself. Nobody should be able to convince you otherwise." Although it wasn't much, it gave me hope that I wasn't going insane. I wondered for a long time if I was exaggerating. As my mother used to say, I might have been overly sensitive. However, I now had evidence, and a few supporters, at the very least. My phone rang just as I was beginning to believe that the worst was past. The name of my sister appeared on the screen. I nearly didn't respond, but I did. She wasted no time at all. She remarked, "You're destroying the family dynamic. What prevented you from letting it go? Mom didn't want any conflict, therefore she didn't invite you. You have merely exacerbated the situation." I refrained from arguing. I didn't shout. "You don't let go of not being invited to your own family's reunion," I simply retorted. Then she hung up the phone. I decided I'd had enough that evening as I sat with my fiancé. I wasn't going to ask for their blessing all the time. A family who obviously didn't want me around was not someone I was going to pursue. I have to back down for my own mental health. The group chat was erased by me. My sister's number was blocked by me. And I allowed myself to give up for the first time in years. If love wasn't offered freely, I wouldn't beg for it. Update 4. My phone called out of the blue a week after the repercussions from the family group chat. I froze after taking a quick look at the screen. It was my father. For background, I didn't get many calls from my dad. Never. I was astonished to see his name appear because he mainly left family affairs to my mom. I considered leaving it on voicemail, but my curiosity won out. I took it up. He initially only made the customary awkward small talk. After a lengthy silence, he finally stated that he wanted to clarify the reunion. He spoke in a rigid, nearly practiced voice. He maintained it wasn't intended to harm me and referred to it as a miscommunication. I hadn't heard anything like an apology from him in a long time. I didn't give him a pass. I inquired as to why I hadn't been invited earlier. After struggling to find the right words, he finally said, "It wasn't intentional." I told him that didn't make sense since how can it be an accident to forget to invite your own child? I persisted, reminding him that my mother's own remarks in the group chat demonstrated differently, but he didn't respond. A second too long, the silence lingered, and then he broke. Quietly, he acknowledged. "She believed it would be better that way. Your mother did not wish for any conflict." That's when I heard it. My mother's voice, followed by a slight background rustle. She must have been using the speakerphone to listen in because she abruptly interrupted the conversation. She answered abruptly, "I'm here too." As though I had called her somehow. The waterworks then began. She accused me of attacking her and making the family feel ashamed by publishing the screenshots, but her voice faltered. She claimed that I, not she, was the source of the issues. She claimed that I had made everything public only to cause her embarrassment and trouble. I didn't shout or argue. I spoke steadily and assured her that I was only seeking the truth and wasn't making any personal attacks. After hearing what was going on, my fiancé, who had been sitting close by, approached. It was enough to ground me when he placed a hand on my shoulder and muttered, "Don't let them twist this." My mother's tone altered when she saw that I wasn't going to back down. After giving a loud sniff, she continued, You only announced your engagement at the reunion to steal your sister's spotlight, which almost made me laugh aloud. I didn't think twice. Calmly, I informed her that, like my sister, I had every right to share good news about my life. No one was in competition with me. I informed her that none of this would have occurred if I had been invited in the first place. I could tell I had touched a nerve by the quiet that ensued. She chose to play the victim, which is her favorite approach, rather than admit anything. It might be better if you don't attend family gatherings at all if you can't forgive us and move on, she remarked forcefully. And there it was, the final command. I remained calm. I refrained from crying. I simply exhaled and answered, if that's how you feel, then fine, before hanging up. I sat there looking at the phone in my hand for a minute. My fiancé took a seat beside me and waited silently. I told him everything that had transpired, including my mom's accusation and ultimatum, as well as my dad's hesitant apology. They're showing you exactly who they are, he continued, nodding. I lay in bed that night and gazed up at the ceiling. I kept replaying the phone call in my head. More than that, though, I began to reflect on all the events that had preceded this. I reflected on the holidays I had spent by myself since my siblings' families came first. My parents' constant comparisons of my unstable career to my brother's corner office and sister's work at the law company. The understated appearance. The contemptuous remarks. This was where it had all been leading. As I laid there, I came to the realization that I didn't deserve this. I wasn't worthy of fighting for meager affection or acting as though nothing was wrong. My siblings would always come first, as my family had often demonstrated to me. For the first time, I made the decision to stop pursuing those who made me feel inadequate. My fiancé sat down across from me and handed me a cup of coffee the following morning. He had a solemn expression. He remarked, I've been thinking. How about hosting our own engagement celebration? Something modest, just those who genuinely stand by us. The concept sounded odd at first. I hadn't even considered celebrating without my family because they had been my default for so long. However, it made more sense the more I about it. Why should I continue to expend my energy on indifferent people? People that loved us for who we were, not who they wanted us to be, were the ones I wanted to celebrate this milestone with. After the reunion, we had a list of friends, my fiancé's family, and a couple of cousins who had gotten in touch with me privately. They all agreed that I was deserving of better treatment. I made the decision to focus on the folks who came to me unconditionally and let go of the things I couldn't control. I kept the celebration a secret from my parents and siblings. I was tired of trying to mend something that had been damaged for years and realized that it would only lead to more turmoil at this point. I was not going to plead for their affection or acceptance for the first time in my life. I had given up trying to find a family that didn't recognize me. At last, I was making my own decision. Fifth update, everything I didn't know I needed was provided at the engagement party. Just my fiancé's family, a few of my relatives who had been there for me through all the turmoil, and close friends made it modest and private. We arranged our backyard with string lights, served a variety of takeout and homemade cuisine, and adorned the tables with flowers that my fiancé had purchased from a nearby market. EasyJet ideal. Early in the evening, people began to arrive. I hadn't experienced such genuine enthusiasm at a family gathering in years, but the atmosphere was lighthearted and full of laughs. As soon as she got there, the cousin who had sent me the screenshots gave me a hug. You're worthy of better, she said. She didn't mention the reunion, which I appreciated. We're proud of you. An hour later, the biggest surprise arrived. Another car drew up to the curb, and my fiancé gave me a little shove. One of my aunts was leaving when I turned around. This aunt wasn't just any aunt though. She was the only one to privately text me to apologize and say she didn't know what had been going on following the group chat controversy. She was unexpected, but there she was, smiling warmly and holding a modest wrapped gift. As she entered the yard, she added, I hope it's okay that I came? She gave me a hug, and for a second I was speechless. I wanted to see you both and say congratulations in person. I simply nodded and opened the door for her. It meant more to me than words could express to have her there. The folks who came through for me without reservation were more important than the statistics. Throughout the evening, my fiancé made a toast. The audience became silent as he lifted his glass. To my future wife, he remarked with a smile, I've seen her overcome so many obstacles and still come out stronger. Her character and the life we are creating together make me really proud. As the audience applauded, someone exclaimed, to the happy couple. People who truly wanted to join us in celebrating were all around me as I stood there with my glass. I felt like I was being seen for the first time. There was only love, no backstabbing remarks, no comparisons, and no compulsion to prove anything. We stayed around the fire pit with a few pals and ended up wrapping things late. I was not mistaken when one of my relatives remarked, laughing, "I haven't seen you this happy in years." After 2 weeks, I received an unexpected email. My dad gave it to me. Before I opened my email, I sat there looking at his name. He apologized first. It felt different this time. He acknowledged that, both during the reunion and in other instances prior to it, he had not defended me. He expressed guilt for not doing more to help me feel included and claimed he had no idea how much I had been harmed over the years. "I know I haven't spoken anything when you needed me to," he wrote. "Even though it might take some time, I hope we can begin repairing our friendship." I scrolled down after reading it twice. His addition at the bottom, "Your mom still doesn't see things the same way," caused me to pause. I'm not sure whether she will ever own up to her faults because she feels like the true victim in all of this. I also apologize for that. Although it hurt, it wasn't shocking. My mother had never taken responsibility for anything. I took some time to consider my response, and then I typed up a brief one. I praised my dad for getting in touch and let him know that while I valued his words, I value his deeds more. It would require work on all sides if he really wanted to rebuild things. I honestly didn't require a response, so I didn't anticipate one right away. I wasn't waiting for him to suddenly turn into the ideal father. His little step was plenty for now. However, I wouldn't accept compromises. I refused to put myself back in a situation where I didn't feel appreciated. Naturally, my sister couldn't help but stir things up. A few days later, I came upon one of her passive-aggressive Facebook posts. It was ambiguous but clear enough. It's funny how some people enjoy revealing personal details to get attention. Good or bad, family is family. I didn't answer. I didn't even give myself enough time to become upset about it. After blocking her, I simply went on. Her opinions, her sarcasm, and her judgment no longer had any influence over me. Life was fuller but quieter in the weeks that followed. I concentrated on running my company, organizing our wedding, and hanging out with the individuals who genuinely cared about me. I at last discovered serenity when I let go of the need to win my family's approval. In retrospect, I saw how much of my life had been wasted attempting to conform to a model that I was never meant to fit. Because I was different, my family had always made me feel inferior. However, that didn't prove me incorrect. Their incapacity to recognize my value was a reflection of them, not of me. Family is everything, as some people may say, and perhaps it is true for them. However, rather than condemnation and exclusion, family should be about love, respect, and support. I've never been happier as I'm finally creating a life with individuals that support me unconditionally. So here I am, going forth guilt-free and regret-free. I have no idea what the future holds for my parents or siblings, but I do know that I will never longer accept anything less than what I am worthy of. And to be honest, it feels really nice. Cast out by my family for favoring my golden child, sister, my aunt helped me. Now they seek my help. Am I the asshole for refusing? My life was completely upended 10 years ago when my family, particularly my sister Claire, chose to exclude me from the house. Why? I was viewed as a traitor by them since I managed to pay for my college education without their assistance. I had nowhere to go when I was 18 and ready to start college. All of this was made possible by Claire, the golden child, who consistently made me seem unimportant in contrast. Claire was my favorite from a young age, yet she is 4 years older than I am. She was the object of my parents' obsession. They would practically hold a celebration if she received an A. You understand what I mean when I say, "Oh, cool. What's for dinner?" When I receive an A. My parents treated Claire like a prodigy by the time she left for a prestigious business school. They covered everything, including her expensive clothes, condo, and tuition. I kept my head down in the meanwhile, knowing that I would have to work things out on my own. Upon being admitted to a prominent UK college to study history, I had the hope that I may receive some assistance. However, no. I was told directly by my parents that they were unable to pay for my education. Although I recognized the high cost of college, their refusal to even co-sign a loan really infuriated me. I only asked them to help me escape a lifetime of debt, not to cover everything. However, they declined. Their logic? They were also hoping to launch a small business at the time, so it seems that all of their resources were going toward that. We already paid for Claire's college. We have to think about our future now. I was stuck. When it came to me, my parents were all about being frugal and responsible. I didn't want to miss the opportunity to attend this college, but it felt like they were purposefully creating barriers for me. My parents had no difficulty spending a lot of money on Claire. I had no choice but to ask my Aunt Denise. My dad's older sister, Denise, is the total antithesis of my parents. In addition to being a brilliant neurosurgeon, she is also quite grounded. There was always this strange tension between her and my parents. They would pretend to be kind at family get-togethers, but it was obvious they were angry with her success. Especially my dad detested being overshadowed by her. At first, I didn't want to engage Denise, but I had to. I contacted her to see if she might cover my tuition. She made no hesitation at all. Of course, I'll help. Why didn't you come to me sooner? I was afraid my father would learn. He would go crazy if he found out that I had asked Denise for money behind his back. I therefore pleaded with Denise to keep it a secret. I believed I was safe for a while. I had paid my tuition and was preparing to go to school. Claire then made the decision to sabotage everything. I'm still not sure how she learned that I had asked Aunt Denise for assistance, but she did. And because she was Claire, she had to make it into a tremendous, dramatic ordeal rather than simply letting it go. I felt something wasn't right the moment I got home from a night out with some pals. Everything I owned was put in boxes. My books, my clothes, even my bed linens. Claire was standing there with this smug, self-satisfied expression on her face as my parents were seated in the living room. I had the impression that I had entered a perverse intervention. My father wasted no time. I had no idea what he was talking about, so I looked at the stack of papers he threw at me and said, "Explain this." I became aware that Claire had completely lost her mind at that point. She had created fictitious emails between Aunt Denise and me, giving the impression that I was betraying the family by disclosing information about their business plans in return for Denise covering my tuition. My eyes were unbelievable. In order to make it appear as though I had betrayed my family, Claire had combed through my laptop, discovered actual emails between Denise and me, and altered them using Photoshop or another program. I was taken aback. My parents refused to listen to me when I tried to explain that it was all a lie. No matter what I replied, they continued to say, "We trusted you and you stabbed us in the back." They obviously believed Claire. She was always believed by them. It seemed as though I had vanished from the world. They instructed me to immediately collect my belongings and depart. I told a total lie, which led to my official expulsion from the house. I pleaded with them to think again. Aunt Denise had already promised to cover my tuition, so I didn't want to put her through any more trouble. My parents, however, were unconcerned. They claimed they didn't want to interact with me and labeled me a traitor. That was it. I only had a few boxes of my belongings and the clothing on my back when I fled. Aunt Denise took me in. To be honest, I'm not sure how I would have managed without her. She immediately took me in and showed me the kind of family I hadn't experienced in years. Denise was the only person who truly cared about me while my parents were preoccupied with their future business and worshiping Claire. I will always be thankful for that. But even today, I can't get rid of the memories of that night. Claire standing there with that arrogant expression on her face, knowing she had won, my parents staring at me like I was a criminal, and all of my belongings packed away when I walked into my house. I was standing on Aunt Denise's doorstep, my life in boxes, having been evicted from my own home. I was still trying to figure out what the hell had occurred. It like a nightmare. In a single night, how does one go from feeling like a member of a family to experiencing homelessness? Even though the entire situation seemed bizarre, I couldn't claim to be all that shocked. Although my parents had always made it apparent that Claire came first, I never imagined it would go this far. Being the angel that she is, Denise embraced me wholeheartedly. She didn't pry or ask a lot of questions. She simply told me that her house was mine for however long I needed it after realizing how hurt I was. That type of generosity, man, it really got to me because I knew at that moment that I had never experienced anything like that from my own parents. I thus took up residence with Aunt Denise. Initially, waking up in her guest room and seeing a house that wasn't mine felt weird. But as time went on, it began to feel more like home than the location where I was raised. As we talked about everything, we got closer. As it happens, I had no idea how much Aunt Denise knew about my parents' actions. For years, she had avoided them and only attended family gatherings out of duty. She revealed to me something that completely shocked me. My father had harbored animosity toward her long before I was even born. It had always been Denise's turn. She attended medical school, married a wonderful man who tragically died young, and created a wonderful life. My dad was doing all right in the meantime, but he constantly felt like she was taking center stage. He was strangely competitive whenever they met. According to Denise, their relationship had basically devolved into a contest to see who could appear more attractive to the other members of the family. However, my dad hated his sister rather than being proud of her. And it wasn't just about jobs. He felt dominated in practically every aspect of life, including money and society. Denise suspected that my parents' treatment of me had been influenced by their jealousy. Denise knew all of this years ago, but she chose to remain silent so as not to aggravate me. She told me everything now that I lived with her. She seemed to be filling in all the blanks in my life that had never made sense, like why my parents always went out of their way for Claire and why they never seemed to care what I did. It all came down to a strange family dynamic that I was completely unaware of. Although it was wonderful living with Denise, I was unable to fully unwind. I kept expecting my parents to call, for Claire to suddenly appear, or for them to say they were sorry. Naturally, though, that never took place. Weeks passed, and nothing happened. Not a single phone call, no text. I was initially incensed. How could they just ignore me as if I didn't exist? But eventually the rage subsided and I became numb. My brain seemed to be turning off all of my feelings so that I could continue to function. But Denise was fantastic. Unless I wanted to, Mom never forced me to discuss what had happened. She gave me time to think things through. She even made sure I had all I needed before I departed for the UK by helping me organize everything for school. I honestly don't know how I would have survived that period of time if it weren't for her. However, despite her backing, my parents' silence was terrible. You would think they would at least check in on your child after evicting them. However, no. A part of me still had expectations, even though I suppose I shouldn't have. Claire texted me about a month after the entire incident. It was just as annoying as she was, which is why I can still clearly recall it. The only thing it said was, "Hope you're doing okay. By the way, don't leave your laptop lying around." That was it. She reminded me that she was the reason I was expelled, but she made no attempt to apologize or acknowledge what she had done. As I gazed at the television, my blood began to boil. Simply put, she was making fun of me. I didn't answer. What was the purpose? There was nothing that made Claire feel bad. She thought that she had won some strange family game. I considered responding with a sarcastic text, but I realized it wouldn't change anything. She would simply relish the attention. After blocking her number, I made an effort to move on. It wasn't simple. A part of me was still hoping for a message from my parents every time I checked my phone. It could have been a passive-aggressive email from my dad acting as though nothing had occurred, or it could have been a message from my mom apologizing for everything. However, there was radio silence. Denise and I developed a strong routine in the months that followed. She evolved into more than simply my aunt. She became my companion, confidant, and essentially my sole remaining relative. I began to see how dysfunctional my parents truly were. They had devoted so much of their time to making Claire into the ideal daughter that they had neglected everything else. And it would be too late for them to correct it when Claire made a mistake, which she would eventually do. As I was preparing to leave for school, I received a second message, this one from my father. The message was brief and straightforward. Good luck in the UK. That was it. No explanation, no apology, nothing. It was like being slapped across the face. All he had to say after everything was, good luck. I didn't even know how to react, so I didn't. I tried not to worry about it and simply erased the message. Denise took me to the airport the day I departed for the UK. She gave me a firm hug and expressed her pride in me, saying she knew I would succeed. Those words, spoken to me by a member of my family for the first time in my life, struck me more strongly than I had anticipated. I felt as though I was leaving behind more than just my house when I boarded that plane. I was leaving behind the aspect of myself that had always aimed for my parents' favor. I made the decision that I no longer needed them after that. I had myself, I had Denise, and I had my future. I wasn't going to waste any more energy chasing after people who obviously didn't care about me, but if they wanted to get in touch, that's okay. I was finished. The UK was a terrific place to live. I made some friends, adapted to college life, and stopped worrying about my family all the time for the first time in years. Although I can't claim to have forgotten about them, I can say that I wasn't thinking about them as much. I was concentrating on my education, planning for the future, and simply attempting to live a life free from the stress of being my parents' shadow. Naturally, though, something had to happen and ruin everything just as everything was going well. I came back to my hometown after graduation, got a fantastic, well-paying job, and then my mother called. Yes, my mother. The same woman who had stopped talking to me ever since I was expelled. It came as a complete surprise. My phone buzzed while I was reviewing some notes for a paper in my dorm room. For a while, I thought I was seeing things when I saw her name appear. My thoughts were racing as I gazed at the television. Do I have to respond to it? Disregard it? Why was she calling me now, after all that had transpired? I gave it a few more rings. Then I took up, against my better judgment. Hello, I answered, attempting to sound composed despite my racing heart. She was unsure of what to say, as seen by the delay on the other end. At last she spoke something. Hey. It's your mom. Who else would it be, really? However, I didn't say that. After nearly 2 years of silence, I simply waited for her to explain why she was calling. After hesitating once again, she abruptly stated, "We need to talk." I couldn't resist laughing. She wanted to talk now? After all, it was really normal for her. However, despite my annoyance, I had a natural curiosity. Why was she contacting me after all this time, and what could possibly be so important? How about, I asked in the most neutral tone I could. She stammered as though she was trying to find the perfect way to say it. Your father and I, we want to see you? I could clearly see the direction of this. They didn't want to see me because they felt awful for throwing me out or because they missed me. They were in need of something, and I was very certain of what it was. Why? I asked directly. Her delayed response just strengthened my suspicions. Her voice was quieter when she did talk, as if she was attempting to appear worried and maternal. I've been going through a difficult period with your dad. The pandemic has made things difficult. The true cause for the call was there. It was precisely what I had anticipated, financial difficulties. I knew their business wasn't doing well, but I hadn't heard much about it since I left. Denise had stated in passing that their shop wasn't doing as well as they had hoped, and it made sense that they were having trouble given the pandemic. But after everything they had done to me, I wasn't going to step in and save them. All right. And, I spoke in a flat tone. I had no intention of making things simple for her. She began, "Your sister, Claire, has been taking care of things for us, but..." I interrupted her at that point. Knowing where this was going, I said, "Let me guess. Claire messed everything up." Her response was sufficient, but there was a lengthy gap on her end. Claire had messed it up, of course. I had no idea why they were taken aback. She always cared more about how she looked than about putting in the effort. It was backfiring. They had trusted her with everything. My mother drew a breathless gasp. She said, "Things haven't been going as planned. And we require assistance." I chuckled. I was unable to resist. They wanted my assistance after everything, after kicking me out, interrupting me, and allowing Claire to run me over? It was unbelievable how bold it all was. Unbelievable, I whispered to myself. "What's so amusing?" my mother inquired, as though she was truly perplexed and couldn't comprehend why I wasn't seizing the opportunity to intervene and save the day. "Are you serious? Do you genuinely believe that I will assist you?" I said, raising my voice. All the feelings I had been suppressing for the last 2 years were rising to the surface, and I could feel the rage rising. Her voice faltered as she said, "We are your parents. We were not perfect, but... However, we require you." Even though she couldn't see me, I shook my head. "Mom, you weren't simply making mistakes. I was ejected from the house by you. You trusted Claire's falsehoods about your own child. You need me now that we haven't spoken in years? And all of a sudden, I'm expected to abandon everything and run?" After then, she was silent. She was clearly unsure of what to say. She most likely wasn't used to me advocating for myself in this way. I would have just followed their instructions when I was still living at home in the hopes that it would maintain harmony. However, it is no longer the case. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me again because I had changed. She spoke at last, but her voice was different. She no longer made an effort to sound kind and kind. She now sounded annoyed, as if she was surprised that I was being so challenging. Sharply, she remarked, "We're still your family. That is at least how much you owe us." The last straw was that. I responded icily, "I owe you absolutely nothing. Go ask Claire for aid if you need it. Remember that she's your golden child?" I hung up the phone without waiting for her answer. Even though my hands were shaking and my heart was racing, I experienced an odd sensation of relief. At last, I had expressed what I needed to. I wasn't going to help them sort out their mess. They could do it alone. I informed Aunt Denise about the situation over the phone that evening. She wasn't shocked in the least. She remarked, "They have been depending on Claire for years. It was only a question of time until everything caught up with them." After a lengthy conversation, I was even more convinced that I had made the proper choice. My parents were now suffering because they had favored Claire above me. Even though that seemed harsh, I wasn't responsible for correcting their errors. I felt free for the first time in a long time. I didn't require their acceptance or approval. I wasn't going to allow them to drag me back into their toxic mess now that I had my own life. I had survived their betrayal, therefore I had done my part. It was their time to face the repercussions now. First update. After that phone conversation with my mother, I believed that the family drama was over. To be honest, I was pleased with the way things turned out. At last, I had defended myself and stated unequivocally that I would not serve as their safety net. I assumed they would simply give up and resume relying on Claire. However, I didn't account for my sister's capacity to stir things up. Claire wasn't going to let me get away with it, of course. Something strange happened around 2 weeks after my mom and I spoke on the phone. A knock on the door interrupted my otherwise uneventful Saturday afternoon while I was tidying up around my house. I don't get many visits anymore. I was a little perplexed because I live alone and the most of my friends know to text before they visit. When I peered through the peephole, guess who was there? Yes, Claire. I briefly believed that I might be seeing things. Why had she come here? With the exception of that one dumb text concerning my laptop, she hadn't spoken to me in years, so why was she now showing up at my door as if nothing had happened? Although my first instinct was to ignore her, I knew Claire well enough to know that she would stay until she achieved her goals. Before I could say anything, she grinned as if we were best friends as I opened the door. "Hey," she exclaimed, sounding vivacious and phony. "A long time has passed." I was totally unprepared and just stared at her for a moment. "Yes, it has. Claire, what are you doing here?" She had this incredibly charming look on her face as if she believed she could win me back with charm. She tilted her head slightly and continued, "I wanted to talk." "May I enter?" I remained in the doorway with my arms crossed. "How about?" I asked, trying to sound as impartial as I could. For a moment, her smile wavered, but she immediately got it back. She tried to seem nonchalant as she said, "Come on. Maybe we should just speak inside?" It's crucial. I ought to have declined. I ought to have told her to go at that very moment. However, my curiosity overcame me. I didn't bother making her feel welcome, but I moved aside to let her in. I didn't ask if she wanted something to drink, and I didn't offer her a seat. After everything she had done, she was fortunate that I was still allowing her to enter my space. As she entered, she seemed to be taking in the space. She seemed to be trying to strike up a conversation when she said, "Nice apartment." I didn't answer. I wasn't here to make friends. "All right, Claire," I responded, cutting right to the chase. "What are you looking for?" She let out a loud sigh as if she was already worn out from the game she was playing. She folded her arms and replied, "Mom told me about your conversation. You know, she's pretty upset." I arched an eyebrow. "Angry?" "Claire, she threw me out of the house." "What is it that she must be upset about?" As if I were the one acting irrationally, Claire rolled her eyes. "Look, I'm not here to go over anything again. Both of us are aware that you have always been challenging." The casualness with which she said that nearly made me chuckle. "Hard," I said it again. "Are you for real now? To get me expelled from the residence, you made up emails. Is that challenging?" She dismissively waved her hand. "That's from long ago. I came here in order to put things right." Uncertain if I had heard her correctly, I blinked. "Would you like to put things right?" I asked, my words brimming with doubt. She nodded as if this were the most logical thing ever. "Yeah," she answered. "I think it's time to move past the family issues, even though I realize they got complicated and I may have overreacted at the time." What I was hearing was unbelievable. "Do you believe that you overreacted?" I spoke, straining to maintain a steady tone. "You ruined my relationship with our parents, Claire. You misled them and said lies about me, and now you're just standing here acting as if it doesn't even matter." I noticed that she was growing irritated as her smile dimmed a bit. "Remember, I didn't come here to dispute. I came to ask for your assistance." Finally, I realized why she was actually at my apartment. Claire wasn't here to apologize or make amends, of course. I had to give her something. My jaw tightened as I gazed at her, anticipating her next move. Finally letting go of the artificial sweetness, she stated, "I've been trying to keep the business going. However, it has been somewhat difficult. We were severely affected by the pandemic, and even though I'm doing everything I can, it's not enough. We are in danger of losing everything, even though Mom and Dad don't want to acknowledge it." With no pity in my heart, I crossed my arms. "I'm going to assume that you want me to help you out." Claire made an uncomfortable move. With defensiveness, she stated, "I'm not asking for a handout. I simply believe that we might be able to work something out together." "I take it you're doing well for yourself?" "I assumed you would like to assist the family." She was unbelievable to me. She was attempting to use remorse to persuade me to save the family business, which she had destroyed. "You figured incorrectly," I replied bluntly. Claire blinked, obviously unprepared for that reaction. "What do you mean?" "Wait," I said firmly. "I mean, I'm not helping you." Not after all of what you have done. Claire, you destroyed my life. Now that you're in difficulty, you expect me to forget that I turned my own parents against me and come to your aid? Number? She looked at me in disbelief. Claire was at a loss for words for the first time in her life. But, we're family. She murmured haltingly, her confidence fading a bit. I gave a headshake. We stopped being family the day you made it your mission to destroy me. Claire's expression turned pale. I could tell she was having trouble processing the fact that she wasn't used to hearing no. She stood up after a long, awkward quiet. Fine, she answered icily. If that's how you want it. Saying, that's how it's going to be. I refused to listen. You made your choices, Claire. Now you have to deal with the consequences. She slammed the door behind her and ran out of the apartment without saying another word. I let the strain out of me for a minute as I stood there. I felt guilty, as if I had been too severe. However, that remorse quickly vanished as I realized everything she had done to me. I felt like I was in charge of my life for the first time in years. Claire's shadow no longer surrounded me. I wasn't the scapegoat or the second best option. At last, I was free of it all. Second update. After Claire stormed out of my apartment, I assumed that everything would die down and that she would finally realize that I was done with her and the whole family drama. Naturally, though, I didn't realize how obstinate she might be. The subsequent wave didn't even arrive a week later. Claire wasn't the one who knocked on my door this time. Both of my parents were involved. Funny how these things usually seem to happen on my days off, and it was a Saturday once more. The knock came as I was browsing through my phone while seated on the couch. And it wasn't soft. The knock was one of those loud, persistent ones that indicates the person on the other end isn't going anywhere anytime soon. I stood up, immediately suspecting who it might be. My mother and father were standing together like a united front when I opened the door. My dad appeared uneasy, as if he didn't want to be there. However, my mother? She was determined to clean up whatever mess had been caused, even if it took using force to get through it, according to the expression in her eye. I leaned against the doorframe and sighed. What do you want? I suppose my mother was trying to maintain a nice demeanor when she smiled at me. Can we come in and talk? We need to sort some things out. I wanted to slam the door in their faces, but I reasoned that they would simply keep coming if I didn't let them in immediately. So I sighed loudly and moved aside to let them in. As they entered, they looked about as if they were expecting something more than a simple apartment. My mom immediately headed for the couch, sitting down and stroking the seat next to her as if I were a small child she was attempting to comfort, while my dad remained silent. I crossed my arms and replied bluntly, I'll stand. All right, she responded, her smile taut. Look, we know things have been difficult between us. I said again, raising an eyebrow. Difficult? That's what you're calling it? When my dad did speak, it was in a rough, low voice. We didn't come here to argue. Without even trying to disguise my annoyance, I questioned. Then what did you come here for? Because I'm pretty sure we've already been over everything. Claire tried, you tried, and I made myself clear, I'm not helping. My mother's smile faltered a bit. She most likely wasn't used to me responding in this manner. She leaned forward a little and continued, that's not why we're here. We're here because we want to apologize. It nearly made me chuckle. Apologize? For what, exactly? Kicking me out? Believing Claire's lies? Or was it that you didn't even bother checking in on me for 2 years? My dad shifted uneasily, as if he would rather be somewhere else than here, and my mom's face hardened. They obviously didn't anticipate me shoving it back in their faces in that manner. My mother added, we know we made mistakes, in a softer tone. But we're family, and family has to stick together. I could sense that I was getting impatient. It was just the same thing again. They would whip out the family card as if it were meant to wipe out all the bad things that had transpired. This time, though, I wasn't going to fall for it. I stated rather plainly, you guys are only here because you need something from me. If things hadn't gone south with the business, I wouldn't even be hearing from you. Let's not pretend this is about family. There was silence for a while. When my dad did finally speak, it was in a rougher but more honest voice than I had heard him in years. You're right. I was surprised by that. I stared at him and blinked. What? You're right, he said again, letting out a deep sigh. We screwed up. We believed Claire. We pushed you out, and we didn't even think twice about it. And now? Well, now things are falling apart, and we're desperate. I was at a loss for words. I didn't think he would be clean about it. In contrast, my mother appeared to be attempting to maintain her composure. She obviously hadn't anticipated that he would simply put everything out that way. I added, I appreciate the honesty, following a lengthy silence. But that doesn't change anything. Then, with a sharper voice, my mother interrupted. It doesn't change the fact that we need you, and you owe us, after everything we've done for you. Once more, that feeling of entitlement was present. They genuinely thought that simply because they were my parents, I owed them something, as if the years of disregard and partiality had no bearing, and that I should help them out now that they were having problems. I don't owe you anything, I stated icily. Not after the way you treated me. You made your choice when you believed Claire over me, when you threw me out and didn't even check if I was okay. Now you want me to save you? That's not how this works. My father remained silent. He just sat there looking shamefully at the floor. However, my mother? She had not finished yet. She raised her voice and shouted, "We're your parents. We raised you, we took care of you, and now you're just going to abandon us?" I nearly felt terrible for her now, so I shook my head. You didn't take care of me. Aunt Denise did. You chose Claire, and now you're stuck with her. That's on you. My mom looked like she was going to blow up, but my dad stopped her before she could say anything by placing a hand on her arm. For the first time since they entered, he looked me in the eye as he got to his feet. He answered, "We understand," in a steady but dejected tone. "We're not going to push you anymore. We just needed to try." I nearly felt sorry for him for a moment. That sympathy vanished though, when I realized all they had done to me. I said, "I hope you figure it out," and moved to open the door for them. But I'm not going to be part of it. My father gave a nod, as if he had anticipated it, but my mother gave me one final glance, part indignant, half begging. However, she got up and followed him out when she realized I wasn't going anywhere. I shut the door after them and stood there for a while, allowing the silence to descend. I had succeeded? For the first time, I felt truly free since I had finally confronted them. My ex and his mistress crashed my open house, mocking my success. But they didn't realize I had already built a life they couldn't destroy. As I reposition the expertly arranged throw pillows on the couch, the aroma of freshly made cookies fills the air. In our company, it's the small details that make a big difference. The open house is prepared to greet prospective buyers, so I take a moment to appreciate my job. I freeze as I turn to see how the refreshments are doing. Ethan and Chloe, my ex-husband and his new wife, whom he left me for, enter the house with the audacity of brass. I put on my most polished smile, but I'm furious on the inside. As he walks up to me, Ethan grins and says, well, if it isn't Zara. Still trying to sell houses? I see. Condescension permeates Chloe's voice when she adds her voice. I'm surprised you're still in this business, Zara. Ethan told me you were never really cut out for it. Refusing to give them the gratification of witnessing my tremors, I bite my tongue. Ethan. Chloe. What a surprise. I didn't expect to see you here. Are you looking for a new place? Ethan wraps Chloe's waist with his arm. Thought we'd see what you have to offer. I recognize the irony. I gave my all to our marriage years ago while helping Ethan establish his legal practice. But I was never good enough at anything. He became aloof, judgmental, and constantly looking for flaws. I obtained my real estate license because I was determined to contribute and forge my own path. At every opportunity, Ethan disparaged my efforts and claimed I was squandering my time. I should have recognized the warning flags back then, but I was too infatuated and blind. I confronted him after learning of his affair with his much younger assistant Chloe. They refer to it as gaslighting since he denied it and made me feel like I was going insane. The truth was right in front of me, even if I didn't want to believe it. I was caught off guard by the divorce. What a joke, Ethan filed, claiming irreconcilable differences. Before the ink on the paperwork dried, he moved in with Chloe. He did everything he could to leave me with nothing, even though I battled valiantly for a just settlement. I reached my lowest point, but I didn't want to stay there. Determining to succeed on my own terms, I put my all into my work, and I succeeded. I launched my own agency after becoming a top-selling agent. I made it my goal to assist women who are struggling, like myself, in finding their ideal houses and starting over. And now I find myself confronting my past. Ethan and Chloe, who are trying to reduce their household size. The thought of their financial difficulties makes me feel a little satisfied. I put on my best act and lead them around the house, pointing out its features. I ignore the sarcastic remarks that Ethan mutters. With her gaze darting anxiously between us, Chloe appears preoccupied. I can't help but make a small jab as we finish the trip. I'm sure I can find you something that fits your budget. My business has been thriving, And I have a lot of high-profile clients. I'm sure I can help you out. Ethan lashes out as his face flushes. You got lucky, Zara. You're just riding on my coattails. I give a charming smile. Luck has nothing to do with it, Ethan. I worked hard for what I have, and I did it all without you. I can see the flaws in their flawless facade as Chloe shifts uneasily. They have no idea what lies ahead. This is only the beginning. As I drive home from the open house, the memories come flooding back. Chloe's scathing comments, Ethan's arrogant expression. They remind me of everything I've attempted to move past, and they're like a knife twisting in my stomach. I remember our marriage, how I helped Ethan through law school, how I had faith in him when others had lost faith. As he started his business from the beginning, I supported him at every turn. But he drifted farther away the more successful he got. I was never good enough at anything. I would act as though I didn't notice when he would arrive home late and smell like perfume and drink. He would simply grunt and withdraw to his study even though I would prepare his favorite dishes and attempt to converse with him. I still recall the day I made the decision to obtain my real estate license. I was sick of depending on Ethan for everything and feeling like a burden. I desired to have something of my own and to contribute. Ethan laughed in my face when I told him about my plans. You? A real estate agent? Don't be ridiculous, Zara. You don't have what it takes. Even though what he said hurt, I didn't let it stop me. I put a lot of effort into my studies, aced my tests, and jumped right into my new job. However, Ethan never helped me. He would minimize my endeavors, claiming that I was squandering my time. The day I learned about Chloe then arrived. I discovered a flirtatious text message between Ethan and his assistant on his phone. My heart broke into a million fragments. That night, my voice trembling with rage and betrayal, I faced him. How could you do this to me, Ethan? To us? He lied while staring me in the eye. I don't know what you're talking about, Zara. You're being paranoid. There's nothing going on between me and Chloe. I fervently hoped that he was telling the truth. But I knew in my heart. It all made sense. The late hours at work, the covert phone conversations, the way he glanced at her when he believed I wasn't looking. After I engaged a private investigator, pictures of Ethan and Chloe caught in the act were revealed. I challenged him once more, this time with evidence. I guess you weren't enough for me, Zara. I need someone who understands me, who supports my dreams, he remarked with a shrug. It was an awful divorce. Ethan resisted me at every turn, attempting to deprive me of everything. He even dared to say that I was the one who had cheated on him. I eventually left with a just settlement, but I was devastated. The greatest years of my life had been spent with Ethan, and he had tossed it all away as if it didn't matter. I reached my lowest point, but I didn't want to stay there. I put all of my effort into my work because I wanted to disprove Ethan. I would prove to him that I was capable of succeeding without his help. And I did. I launched my own agency after becoming a top-selling agent. Helping women like myself who had been knocked down but refused to stay there was my goal. However, everything comes flooding back when I meet Ethan and Chloe today. The hurt, the betrayal, the rage. I want to lash out, scream, and give them even a small portion of the pain they inflicted on me. I won't though. I am superior to that. I'm more powerful than that. I have created a life for myself that Ethan will never be able to take away. I inhale deeply and exhale slowly as I pull into my driveway. I refuse to be affected by them. I refuse to let them prevail. I'm a survivor named Zara. And I will be damned if I let Chloe and Ethan drag me down once more. On a Tuesday, the divorce papers arrived. The receptionist buzzed me while I was reviewing some postings at my desk. Zara, there's a courier here for you. He says it's urgent. With trembling hands, I ripped the packet open and signed for it. I was immediately struck by the words, petition for divorce. Next to the checkbox for irreconcilable differences, Ethan's name stood out accusingly. It seemed as though someone had punched me in the stomach. Even though I knew things were awful, I never imagined he would get this bad. I never imagined that he would simply give up on us. He wasn't picking up when I called him. My voice became increasingly frantic as I left message after message. Ethan, please, can we just talk about this? Can we try to work it out? However, he had vanished. His car was gone as I passed our house, and there was a moving van parked in front of it. As I sat there with the engine running and tears running down my cheeks, the neighbors looked at me pityingly. He moved in with Chloe that same day, as I later learned. He lacked the civility to wait for the divorce to be finalized. He was eager to begin his new life with her. It was an awful divorce. Ethan tried to leave me with nothing, but he fought me to the death. He engaged the most skilled and merciless attorneys, and they thoroughly destroyed me in court. I recall sitting across from him in that impersonal courtroom on the day of the last hearing. He refused to even glance in my direction, instead focusing on Chloe, who was sitting smugly in the front row. It ended when the judge struck his gavel. Even though I received a settlement, it felt like a pointless win. Everything that had ever been important to me was gone. After that, I reached my lowest point. In the morning, I was barely able to get out of bed, much less go to work. To dull the ache, I started drinking. I pushed my family and friends away. I didn't want their platitudes or sympathy. However, I woke up one day and understood that I couldn't continue in this manner. I couldn't allow Ethan to prevail. I couldn't allow him to ruin me. I put my all into my work because I was determined to be successful. I accepted every client and every listing. Fueled by an unquenchable fire in my gut, I worked harder than I had ever done. Painfully and slowly, I began to reconstruct my life. I discovered a new apartment, a little, comfortable space that was exclusively mine. I met new pals who were not sympathetic toward me and who were unaware of my background. I concentrated on finding my clients the homes of their dreams. I focused on helping women going through divorces, women who, like me, were beginning over. I became their rock and advocate. I began to recover as the months stretched into years. The pain grew tolerable, but it never quite disappeared. I discovered how to cope with it and turn it into motivation for my goals. I launched my own agency after becoming a top-selling agent. I surrounded myself with positive, self-believing people. I discovered a fresh feeling of direction and motivation for getting out of bed in the morning. However, I will always remember what Ethan did to me. He threw me aside like I was nothing, and I will never forget it. And I promised to hold him accountable one day. I would one day show him what he lost by choosing Chloe over me. I would get my revenge one day. I put my attention on my work, my clients, and creating the life I deserve for the time being. Zara here, and I'm not going to be broken. As the years went by, I threw myself wholeheartedly into my profession. I accepted every challenge and every listing. I was determined to prove myself, so I put in more hours than everyone else, and it was successful. I became the top-selling agent in my office as my sales figures soared. My clients were so pleased with me that they told their friends and relatives about me. My area of expertise was helping women who were starting over or going through difficult circumstances. I turn into their confidant and mentor. I assist them in locating homes, places where they can recover and start over. At her closing, one of my clients, Sarah, a single mother, gives me a big hug. With tears in her eyes, "I couldn't have accomplished this without you, Zara," she says. "You gave me the strength to start over, to believe in myself again." Her advice sticks with me and strengthens my resolve. I understand what it's like to feel lost and like you've reached your lowest point. However, I am also aware that it is possible to rise above the past and create a new life from its ashes. I launch my own agency and surround myself with a group of strong, kind ladies. We establish ourselves as the agency of choice for women in transition, those who require a little more understanding and support. I establish myself as a respected member of the community, and my business prospers. I get asked to offer my experience and knowledge at conferences. For young women who are interested in real estate, I even launched a mentorship program. But Ethan is always in the forefront of my mind. I will always remember how he deceived me and abandoned me, leaving me broken and alone. I monitor him and his legal practice. I hear tales of unethical behavior and clients that feel taken advantage of and deceived. I waited for the ideal opportunity to present itself. I'm prepared to wait as long as it takes since I understand that retaliation is a dish that tastes the finest cold. Then, one day, an opportunity presents itself. I'm holding an open house for a luxurious home, a magnificent mansion with expansive city views. I hear a recognizable voice behind me while I'm displaying the gourmet kitchen. "Zara, I thought that was you." When I turn around, I see Ethan and Chloe, who appear older and more scruffy than I recall. Chloe's face is unpleasant and pinched, and Ethan's hair is becoming gray at the temples. "Ethan, Chloe, what a surprise," I say calmly, with a kind smile. "I didn't expect to see you here." Chloe says, "We're looking for a new place," as she glances around the room. "Something a little more affordable." My eyebrows go up. "Oh, we're having some financial trouble, are we?" Ethan frowns, his face flushed. "That's none of your business, Zara. We're just exploring our options." I grin slowly, like a predator. "Of course. Well, as you can see, business is booming for me. I've got high-profile clients from all over the city, and my agency is thriving. I'm sure I could find you something suitable." "We don't need your help, Zara. We're doing just fine on our own," Ethan says, glaring at me while Chloe appears uneasy. I turn back to the kitchen and shrug. Suit yourself. But if you change your mind, you know where to find me. I can't help but feel a rush of satisfaction as they leave. Despite the fact that Ethan broke me once, I've become stronger and better than before. Now that I've witnessed his struggles and the weaknesses in his flawless exterior, I know it's almost time for me to exact my retribution. Even though I lost the battle years ago, I'm still committed to winning the war. And with my pride and head held high, I'll do it how I want. Despite having ruined my past, Ethan and Chloe have no influence over my future. I'm Zara, and I can't be stopped. My assistant buzzes me when I'm sitting in my office a few days after the open house. Zara, there's Chloe here to see you. She says it's urgent. A glimmer of astonishment passes, but I maintain my composure. Send her in. Chloe enters, appearing worn out and anxious. She avoids my eyes as she fidgets with her purse. Zara, I need your help. I recline in my chair and examine her. Oh? And why would I help you, Chloe? You and Ethan made it pretty clear you wanted nothing to do with me. She inhales deeply before finally seeing me in the eye. Ethan and we're having some financial difficulties. His law firm is struggling, and we're barely making ends meet. We need to sell our house, but we don't know where to start. At what she said, I can't help but feel a little satisfied. The powerful lawyer, Ethan, came to me and begged for my assistance. How the powerful have fallen, oh. However, I maintain a neutral look and a professional voice. I see. And you think I'm the right person to help you? With beseeching eyes, Chloe nods. You're the best in the business, Zara. Everyone knows that. And I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but I'm hoping we can put that behind us, for the sake of our shared history. Sensing an opening, I resist the want to laugh in her face and tell her precisely where she can stick her shared history. Very well, I responded as I straightened my skirt and got to my feet. I'll take a look at your property and see what I can do, but I make no promises. With a look of relief on her face, Chloe nods enthusiastically. Thank you, Zara. You have no idea how much this means to us. Oh, but I think I do, Chloe. I think I know exactly how much it means to you. And I plan to use that to my full advantage. I help Ethan and Chloe prepare their house for sale over the course of the following few weeks. I send in my crew of photographers and stage designers to turn the dilapidated property into a sleek, contemporary focal point. I can't help but notice the tension between them, though, even while I work. Being irritated and short-tempered, Ethan lashes out at Chloe over the simplest things. In contrast, Chloe appears withdrawn and miserable, with dead dull eyes. One day, Chloe pulls me away while we're reviewing some papers. Zara, can I talk to you for a minute? In private? I walk her into a quiet room and nod. Her hands tremble as she inhales deeply. I don't know how much more of this I can take. Ethan, he's not the man I thought he was. I pretend to be surprised and raise an eyebrow. Oh, what do you mean? Tears come to Chloe's eyes. He's controlling, manipulative. He's been emotionally abusive for years, but I never wanted to admit it. I thought I could change him, but I was wrong. I suppressed the glimmer of pity I have for her. This woman destroyed my life by stealing my spouse. I cannot afford to be sympathetic to her. I'm sorry to hear that, Chloe, I remarked in a calm, non-committal tone. But what do you expect me to do about it? Her eyes are beseeching as she looks at me. I don't know. I just needed to tell someone. I feel so trapped. So alone. I nod, my thoughts rushing. It's this. This is my chance to finally defeat Ethan, the moment I've been waiting for. I understand. I put a hand on her shoulder and said. And I want to help you, Chloe. But you have to be willing to help yourself first. You have to be ready to leave him. To start over. Her face crumples as she nods. I know I do. But I'm scared, Zara. I'm so scared. I give her a shoulder squeeze while speaking in a forceful yet comforting tone. I understand how you're feeling, but know that you're not alone, Chloe. I'm here to support you, and together, we'll make sure Ethan receives the justice he deserves. I'm polite and professional, but I can't help but notice the building tension between Ethan and Chloe as we work closely together over the following 3 days, showing them possible properties that match their budget. Ethan is irritable and angry, sneering at each house I show them. Is this all you can do, Zara? I believed you were meant to be the town's top agent. Keeping my smile intact, I bite back a retort. I promise you, Ethan, that I'm showcasing the finest houses within your budget. However, I'm happy to keep searching if you have a specific idea in mind. During our showings, Chloe appears withdrawn and preoccupied. She seldom talks and keeps her eyes on the ground. I see her glancing at Ethan with a mix of fear and hatred, and I know that our chat from the other day is still a big part of her thoughts. Chloe abruptly interrupts us as we're driving back from yet another failed showing, saying, "Zara, is it possible for us to speak in private?" I turn to look at Ethan, who is frowning out the window. "Chloe, of course. How about we get coffee?" After dropping Ethan off at their hotel with the promise that we will meet later to discuss some paperwork, I take Chloe to a quiet cafe and order a cappuccino for the two of us. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day. About leaving Ethan, starting over," she says, taking a big breath while holding her mug tightly. I maintain a neutral expression as I nod. "And what have you decided?" Tears well up in Chloe's eyes as she says, "I'm not sure whether I can do it. I've known him my entire life, and I'm afraid of what he might do if I try to leave." I take her hand across the table and say, "I know it's scary, Chloe. But this is far less than what you deserve. Instead of someone who depresses and manipulates you, you deserve to be with someone who loves and respects you." She wipes her eyes with a tissue and nods, saying, "I understand. You're correct, I know that. However, I'm not really sure where to begin." Squeezing her hand, I say in a firm but comforting manner, "Start by speaking with a lawyer. Find out what alternatives you have. Meanwhile, keep a record of everything. Note every instance of Ethan being domineering or abusive. If you choose to leave, it will help you make a stronger argument." Chloe nods and takes a trembling breath. "All right, I can do that, all right." With a glimmer of optimism, I grin at her and say, "And Chloe, keep in mind, you're not alone. I'm here to support you at every turn." Ethan is waiting excitedly in the hotel foyer as we return after finishing our coffee. "Where have you been?" Glaring at Chloe, he yells, "I've been waiting for more than an hour." I move forward and say, "I'm sorry, Ethan," in a composed and businesslike tone. I promise that everything is in control, but Chloe and I had some business to discuss. His eyes widen as he frowns at me, saying, "It had better be. Zara, I'm too busy to play any more of your games." With a lazy, rapt smile, I say to him, "Oh, Ethan, you have no idea what kind of game I'm playing." I can feel his gaze piercing my back as I turn to leave, but I ignore it since I have work to do. I assist Chloe in gathering proof of Ethan's abuse over the course of the following several weeks, and she begins journaling, recording every harsh remark and every act of control. She also takes pictures of the bruises on her arms and the holes he has punched in the walls. I'm also constructing my own case against him in the meantime. When the time comes to finally take Ethan down, I'll be prepared to watch him fall and see the expression on his face when he realizes that he's finally met his match. In Zara, the woman he once destroyed, the woman who rose from the ashes, stronger and more powerful than ever before, the woman who will be his ultimate downfall. I reach out to some of his former clients, the ones who felt cheated and misused, and I gather evidence of his unethical practices and shady dealings. I didn't anticipate the day of reckoning coming so quickly. Chloe, who is distraught, answers the phone as I'm in my office reviewing some papers. "Zara, please, you have to help me." Ethan learned about the attorney. He is enraged. He's threatening to destroy me and injure me. In a second, I'm standing up and reaching for my purse and keys. "Listen, Chloe. Now leave that place. Find a secure location. I'll look after Ethan." On the other end of the line, I can hear her crying, all right, I'll go to my sister's apartment. But please, Zara, exercise caution." He's not thinking clearly. My heart pounding, I hang up the phone, knowing what I must do. My thoughts racing with potential outcomes. I know I need to be clever about this. Have to play my cards exactly right, as I make my way to Ethan's office. He looks up from his desk, his face contorted with anger, and they enter his office without knocking, holding my head high. "What the hell are you doing here, Zara?" I give him a chilly, cunning smile and say, "Ethan, I believe you understand exactly why I'm here. I am aware of the things you have been doing to Chloe. I am aware of the manipulation and abuse." With his hands clenched at his sides, he gets to his feet and says, "Zara, you don't know anything. You're just a resentful, envious lady who finds it impossible to move on from the past." With a hard, brittle laugh, I say, "Oh, Ethan, you don't know what I'm capable of. I have been observing you in order to collect proof. I am aware of your dubious activities and immoral behavior. I have enough to demolish everything you've ever worked for and ruin you." I can see the terror in his eyes as his face goes pale. "You're bluffing. You've got nothing on me." "Oh, but I do, Ethan," I say, reaching into my purse and taking out a big folder. "You cheated and lied to your former clients, and I have their testimonies. I have financial documents that prove your fraud and embezzlement. I have pictures of the bruises you gave Chloe when you were angry. He rushes to retrieve the folder as I hurl it onto his desk. Ethan, it's over. You're done. And I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life in prison if you ever approach Chloe again or touch her. His face twisted with dread and anger, he looks up at me and says, Zara, you can't do this, you can't ruin me. With a low, ominous whisper, I bend up close and say, watch me. He takes my arm and digs his fingers into my skin as I turn to go. Zara, you'll pay for this? I'll see to that. With my eyes burning with rage, I yank my arm away. No, Ethan. You will be held accountable for what you have done to Chloe, me, and everyone else you have harmed in the process. I'm going to be the one to ensure that you make the payment. With my heart thumping in my chest, I leave his office, knowing that this is only the beginning and that a long and challenging road lies ahead, but I also know that I'm prepared for it. I'm ready to stand up for what's right, to regain the power that Ethan took from me all those years ago. I get into my car and drive to Chloe's sister's house, my mind racing with potential solutions. I know I must be there for her, to support her during this trying time, but I also know I must be strong, to take the lead, because this is my battle too. I am Zara, and I am a force to be reckoned with. Heaven help anyone who tries to stand in my way. This is my chance to put things right, to get the retribution I have been longing for. And I will not stop until Ethan is held accountable and made to pay for all the suffering he has caused. The consequences of my confrontation with Ethan are swift and severe. Within days, his abusive behavior and unethical practices are widely publicized in the city's newspapers and news websites. His law firm collapses, sending clients running in droves. His partners distance themselves in an attempt to preserve their own reputations. And Ethan himself is humiliated, his name becoming associated with dishonesty and corruption. Knowing that I contributed to his demise, I watch it all play out with a grim sense of satisfaction, but I also know that my work is far from done. Chloe files for divorce, and I assist her in finding a new home, a modest but comfortable apartment in a quiet neighborhood. She is terrified and overwhelmed, but I reassure her that she is not alone and that there are people who want to support her. She tells me about years of abuse and manipulation, the ongoing fear and self-doubt, and I tell her about my own divorce, how Ethan almost destroyed me but I found the strength to rebuild my life. We spend long hours talking, sharing our stories and our pain, and together we begin to heal, finding a new sense of purpose and hope. Chloe goes to treatment and begins classes to complete her degree. I immerse myself in my profession, committed to changing the lives of other women who have experienced similar hardships. After a few months, things start to return to normal, and Ethan fades into the background as a warning about what happens when ego and power run amok. However, one day, I get a call that completely alters everything. Ethan is pleading with me for assistance. Zara, please, he pleads in a broken and frantic voice. I know I have no right to ask, but I don't know where else to turn. My freedom, my reputation, and my career are all on the line. I need your assistance. I'm tempted to end the call and let him pay for his crimes, but then I recall something my therapist said about the need for forgiveness and how harboring hate and resentment ultimately damages us. I inhale deeply and then make a choice that even surprises me. All right, Ethan, I'll assist you. But not for me, nor for you. Because in order to move on with my life, I must let go of the past. We meet at a coffee shop, and as I listen to him open up to me about his anxieties, his regrets, and his desperate attempt to put things right, I feel a shift in myself. A sense of release and closure. Then, feeling lighter than I have in years, I get up to go, giving him tools and advice on how to get assistance and make amends. With tears in his eyes, he adds, "Thank you, Zara. I know I don't deserve your kindness, but I'm grateful nonetheless." With a little smile teasing my lips, I nod. Ethan, look after yourself. Additionally, keep in mind that there is always time to start afresh. I feel at peace as I leave the coffee shop, knowing that although I will always remember the suffering and anguish of my past, I have managed to go on and create a new life founded on fortitude, resiliency, and optimism. I feel a rush of pride and thankfulness for how far I've come and for the person I've become when I think back to the woman I was all those years ago, the one who was lost and shattered and believed she would never find her way out of the darkness. I am Zara, a lady who has persevered through hardships and emerged stronger on the other side. I am confident that I possess the bravery and tenacity to confront any obstacles life presents and to keep going forward, one step at a time. After my husband gave his mother a key to our home and helped her destroy my life, I exposed their lies with the police at my doorstep. When I opened my front door, I didn't notice the strewn documents or the toppled furniture right away. It was the quietness, that oppressive, strange hush that envelops you like a veil of death and whispers that something is gravely amiss. My name is Audrey, and I recently attended a 3-day business retreat where I learned how to trust my coworkers through absurd team-building activities. Now that I'm standing in my cluttered living room, I see that I should have prioritized trusting my own family more. As I called Ryan's phone, my fingers were shaking. Voicemail's recognizable click is heard after 1 or 2 rings. Naturally, my beloved husband was most likely at his mother's place, acting as though he had no idea why his wife had called. "Ryan, someone broke into the house. The safe is open. Call me back immediately." I cataloged the damage as I wandered through the wreckage of my home. The couch cushions were cut open, drawers were pulled out and emptied, and picture frames were placed face down. However, they hadn't been searching for cash or valuables. This was personal, no. My grandmother's letters, the only remnants of her that I still possessed, were the first thing they targeted. It buzzed on my phone. Not Ryan. Evan at work. He inquired, "How's the drive back?" "Someone broke into my house," I said, shaking my voice. "The safe." They knew the combination. "Jesus, are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" I tossed away a ripped magazine and said, "No. I know exactly who did this. Helen's fingerprints are all over this mess. She's been trying to get those letters for months." "Your mother-in-law? Why would she?" I arrived at the kitchen, where all the cabinets were empty, and said, "Because she can't stand that Ryan married someone who won't bow to her every whim. She thinks those letters prove my grandmother's family wronged hers decades ago, some ancient real estate dispute she won't let die." When Evan said, "Call the police." "And tell them what?" "That my mother-in-law used a key my husband probably gave her to steal family documents. That my sister-in-law probably helped because she's bitter about her divorce and wants to hurt someone else's marriage." Though it sounded empty, I chuckled. "They're too smart for that. They'll say Ryan gave them permission. It'll be my word against the entire Miller family." The door to the basement was ajar. I had not yet looked down there. "I have to go, Evan. I need to see what else they took." "Audrey, wait." After hanging up, I went down the stairs. My feet creaked with every stride. More mayhem was shown when the basement light flicked on. However, I noticed a tiny piece of paper stuck behind a toppled box. I managed to liberate it. It was a 3-day-old receipt for a duplicate key from the hardware store. Once more, my phone buzzed. "Ryan." Before I could say anything, he inquired, "Where are you?" "At Mom's," it was his words. "Listen, Audrey, I can explain." "Did you give her a key?" "Quiet." "Afterwards. She just wanted to look for some old family photos while you were away. I didn't think." "You never do think when it comes to her, do you?" I clenched my fist around the receipt. Those letters were all I had left of my grandmother, Ryan. The only things that were truly mine. "We can talk about this when I get home." "No." The word was piercing enough to pierce. "We'll talk about this in front of everyone. I'm coming over there right now. And Ryan, tell your mother to prepare for war." After hanging up, I stood in my basement, surrounded by the ruins of faith. Like everyone else in their lives, they believed they could break me and force me to submit to their authority. However, they were unaware of what they had just begun. Sometimes the opponent who knows how to hit back harder is more dangerous than the one who hits first. My skin crawled when I saw Helen's immaculate living room. While my house was in ruins across town, everything else was in its proper place, not even a cushion out of place. Helen's interpretation of reality was depicted through the carefully chosen family images on her walls, which conveyed the story of Ryan and Chloe's early years. There aren't any photos of my wedding day in them. Helen poured tea into exquisite cups, her voice dripping with honeyed, delicious poison. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said. "Ryan gave me permission to look for old family albums while you were away, nothing more." With her arms folded and her wedding ring noticeably missing, Chloe sat next to her mother. "You're being hysterical, Audrey, as usual." I put the receipt from the hardware store on the coffee table. "Funny how you needed a new key made 3 days ago. Planning ahead?" Eyes flitting between his mother and myself, Ryan shifted in his seat and said, "Maybe we should all calm down." "Oh, we're very calm," I remarked as I observed Helen's immaculately manicured fingers encircling her teacup. "Just like we were calm last Christmas when you went through my phone while I was sleeping. Or last month, when you showed up unannounced at my office to check on me. When Helen said, 'I worry about my son. Someone needs to look out for his interests.'" "His interests?" I laughed till my throat ached from the broken glass. "Or yours. Mother was right about you from the start." Chloe's eyes shone as she leaned forward. "You never understood our family, always keeping secrets, hiding things in that safe of yours. Those letters belonged to my grandmother. Letters that prove your family cheated ours 60 years ago. Helen's mask broke. That property should have been ours. Your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing when she, Ryan warned, but it was too late. Slowly, the pieces clicked into place as I stood up. So you admit you took them? Helen's face suddenly became smoother. I admitted nothing. And you have no proof. With my hand hovering over the record button, I took out my phone and said, "You're right. But I will. Ryan, are you coming home or staying here?" He glanced at his mother, then at me, constantly conflicted, always taking the easy route. I think maybe we all need space to cool off. I paused to glance back at Helen before making my way to the door, saying, "Wrong answer. You know what's funny? Those letters you stole? They're not even the originals. Just copies I kept as decoys. Grandmother taught me well. Always keep what matters most where manipulative people can't reach it." The clatter of Helen's teacup against its saucer was heard. "You're lying." I asked. "Am I? Guess you'll have to wonder about that, along with what else I might have hidden away." I looked into Ryan's eyes. "Don't bother coming home tonight, or maybe ever." He started to get up, but Chloe grabbed his arm and said, "Audrey, wait." She urged, "Let her go. She's just trying to manipulate you, like always." I left Helen's well-organized world behind and made my way to my car. I held the steering wheel with trembling hands, but not because of terror. As I had previously stated, the originals were secure because they had been kept in a safety deposit box ever since I married Ryan and seen Helen's hunger when Grandma's letters were brought up during the wedding. It buzzed on my phone. Evan once more. He inquired, "How bad was it?" They fell for the ruse. Helen essentially admitted it. "I started the engine, but I have another task for you. Remember that security system you installed at your lake house? The one with the hidden cameras?" "Yeah, why?" "Because I'm done playing defense. They want to go through my things. Let's make sure we catch them in the act next time." As I backed away, I noticed Helen's house become smaller in my rear-view mirror. "And Evan, thank you for being the one person in my life who actually listens. Always. But Audrey, just be careful. People like that, they're most dangerous when they're cornered." With plans already racing through my head, I hung up the phone. Helen believed she knew everything there was to know about me. She understood me well. She had overlooked one important fact, though. I had observed her influence everyone for 3 years. It was time to apply the principles I had acquired from the greatest. Although it wasn't my typical location, the coffee shop across from Helen's preferred hairdresser offered me the ideal view. After 2 hours of observing, Evan moved into the seat across from me and pushed a brand new cup in my direction. His words, "The cameras are set up. Motion sensors, night vision, everything feeding directly to your phone. But are you sure about this?" I gestured to the window of the salon where Helen and Chloe were sitting, receiving their weekly manicures. I hit the play button on my phone and said, "Listen." During our confrontation, the bug I had placed in Helen's handbag allowed me to hear their voice as well. Helen was stating, "We need those original letters. That safety deposit box has to be at her bank downtown. Ryan says she's been going through their financial records," said Chloe. "Probably planning to divorce him and take everything." She yelled, "Over my dead body, Helen. I didn't spend 30 years building this family's reputation to have her destroy it. We're going back to the house tomorrow while she's at work. There has to be something we can use against her." I put an end to the recording. "Still think I'm paranoid?" Evan's expression stiffened. "We should take this to the police and tell them?" I put my hands around the steaming cup and said, "And tell them what? That my mother-in-law is planning to rob me? They'll say it's a family matter. Besides, I want more than just stopping them. I want them to face consequences for once in their privileged lives." It buzzed on my phone. "Ryan. I'm calling once more. For the 3rd time today." I turned it down. "He's been sleeping at their house," I said. "Probably plotting with them, trying to figure out where the originals are. Or maybe he's worried about you." My coffee tasted unpleasant, so I said, "Then he should have worried before giving them a key to our house. Before choosing them over me again." Ryan texted, "Come home, please. We must speak." "Home?" I whispered. "Like that means anything anymore?" Evan bent over. "Audrey, I know you're hurt, but..." The entrance of the salon chimed. Helen and Chloe came out with shiny new manicures. Helen stopped and stared straight into the coffee shop window as they made their way to her Mercedes. I remained motionless, unable to breathe. Her mouth formed the sly smirk I had come to despise. She was aware that I was observing. I said, "Time to go," and suddenly stood up. "They'll be at my house tomorrow at 10 o'clock, according to their usual schedule. That's when we'll catch them." Evan's eyebrows went up. "I thought you wanted to handle this yourself." "I did. I do." I collected my belongings, my hands trembling a little. "I can't face them alone anymore. I need someone in my corner. Always." He lightly touched my arm. "Just promise me something. Don't let revenge consume you. I've seen what it does to people." As I watched Helen's car drive away, I thought back to our wedding reception, when she had cornered me in the restroom and first revealed her true nature. "You'll never be good enough for this family," she'd stated. "One day, Ryan will realize that." I informed Evan, "This isn't about retaliation. It's about justice. And maybe saving Ryan from them, even if he doesn't want to be saved." Once more, my phone buzzed. A message from an unidentified number. When I opened it, my blood froze. "Found something interesting in your grandmother's old law firm records. Tomorrow noon, Riverside Park. Come alone, or Ryan learns everything about the Anderson case." Evan saw my face. "What's wrong?" With my thoughts racing, I closed the message. My grandmother's greatest regret, the secret she carried to her grave, and the true cause of Helen's animosity toward our family was the Anderson case. "Nothing," I pretended to smile. "Just work stuff. I should go prepare for tomorrow." But Helen's comments from 3 years ago kept repeating in my mind as I made my way to my car. "Ryan will understand it one day." Perhaps she was correct. Perhaps he would tomorrow. Perhaps it was time for him to do so. At lunchtime, Riverside Park appeared different, somehow cooler. Holding a manila envelope containing ammunition for whatever game Helen was playing, I sat on a bench. The case files of Anderson. Decades ago, my grandma had sealed them away. In my hands now, they were a weapon. A shadow landed on my lap. "Not Helen. Ryan." "My mother told me everything," he claimed. He sat next to me, keeping a safe distance from me. "About the Anderson case. About what your grandmother did to our family." It felt like a heavier envelope. "Did she tell you how your grandfather tried to blackmail mine? How he threatened to destroy their law firm unless they gave him that property?" "That's not," he paused, face rubbing. "She said you'd try to twist things, like she twisted you." I looked over at him. "When did you give her the safe combination, Ryan?" His silence was sufficient response. I went on. "The day after our wedding. When she convinced you I was hiding something. That's why you've been checking our bank statements, right? Looking for evidence I'm stealing from you." "I was protecting our family." "Our family?" I laughed, but my voice didn't sound like it. "There is no our family. There's only ever been yours." It buzzed on my phone. Regarding the cameras he had set, Evan was messaging. Everything was prepared for the trap of tomorrow. All of a sudden, though, it felt empty. "She's using you," I whispered. "She always has. And you let her, because it's easier than standing up to her." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." I dropped the envelope on his lap and stood up. "Here. The precious Anderson case files. Proof that your grandfather was the one who committed fraud, not mine. Proof that your mother's been lying all these years." He gazed intently at the envelope. "How did you get them?" "From my grandmother's old partner. Turns out, he's been waiting years for someone to finally expose the truth." I took a step back. "But you know what? Keep them. Burn them. Give them to Helen. I don't care anymore." "Audrey, wait. I filed for divorce yesterday." The words hung like broken glass between us. Ryan's face turned white. "You what?" "Check your email. The papers should arrive today." Now my hands were steady. "I'm done being the villain in Helen's story. Done watching you choose them over me. Done pretending we have a marriage worth saving." He approached me as he rose up and said, "We can fix this. I'll talk to Mother." "That's exactly the problem," I said, stepping back from his contact. "Your first instinct is still to run to her. It always will be." Once more my phone buzzed. This time, "Helen. Where are you? We had a deal." I returned the type. "The deal has changed. Inquire about the files with Ryan." "You can't just throw away 3 years of marriage," Ryan stated. I started to go, but stopped when I heard, "You already did that when you gave them the key to our house." You know what the saddest part is? I actually thought I could save you from them. But you don't want to be saved. Audrey. Goodbye, Ryan. I passed the seat where we used to have Sunday lunches and the location where he had proposed as I strolled through the park. Helen, Ryan, and even Chloe were all buzzing on my phone. I made them all quiet. Only Evan's message was received. The cameras are in real time. Do you still intend to carry out tomorrow's plan? At the park's exit, I paused and took one final glance back. Ryan appeared disoriented as he stood where I had left him, holding the package tightly. My determination faltered for a second. Then I recalled the broken safe, the broken house, and the 3 years of gaslighting and deceptive tactics. Yes, I did reply to the text. However, plans changed. I no longer only wished to catch them in the act. What are you looking for? I observed as Ryan, who was constantly rushing back to Mother, took out his phone and most likely called Helen. I typed, I want to destroy them, each and every one. Because sometimes destroying everything and starting anew is the only way to save yourself. I was sitting in my car across the street when the security camera feed flashed on my laptop screen. Helen's typical Thursday morning interruption is 10 minutes away. Every aspect of my property, including the front and back doors as well as the garden walk Helen loved to criticize, was caught by Evan's intricate setup. From the passenger seat, Evan said, "You don't have to watch this. We can just let the cameras record." My coffee cup made my fingers whiten. I need to see it. Need to know exactly how they do it. Helen's Mercedes smoothly came to a stop in front of my house on time. Chloe followed her out, as always immaculately styled. Then a third door opened, and Ryan appeared. In my hands, the coffee cup crumbled. He is assisting them. They went to the main door. Ryan looked over his shoulder anxiously. Helen gestured angrily as she spoke. He produced his original key, not the duplicate. Jesus, whispered Evan. Audrey, maybe we should wait. As a fourth figure stepped out of Helen's car, I took hold of his arm. Who is that? With a briefcase in hand, the man in the pricey suit walked with authority. Somehow, he looked familiar. That's James Morton, Evan announced. Helen's lawyer. I've seen him at charity events. The group vanished within my home. I flipped between camera angles, seeing them navigate places with unsettling resemblance. Helen led them as a general would lead soldiers. She said, "The study," clearly audible over the covert microphones. "Those Anderson files have to be here somewhere." Mother, added her. She said she gave them to me. Ryan made a feeble protest. Copies, obviously. Helen yelled, "You think your wife would give up her only leverage? Search everything." Once more I saw them tearing up my house. However, things were different this time. This time, I noticed that Ryan was opening drawers with trembling hands. As Chloe knocked books from the shelves, I noticed her smug smile. I witnessed Helen's disguise come off when she believed no one was looking, exposing her true desperation. Morton said, "Behind the safe," without warning. "Did you check behind it?" I gasped. The safe on the wall had been a ruse. There was nothing back there, but everyone was aware of it. Too soon, Ryan answered. "No, there's nothing back there." Helen squinted her eyes. "Move it, Mother, move it." My fingers hovered above 911 as I reached for my phone. The prior owner had installed a secret compartment behind that safe. There were documents within that showed Helen's own financial misdeeds, which were considerably more devastating than the Anderson case. Compiled with care over 3 years of observation and anticipation. Ryan took a step forward, then halted. "No," he replied. Helen turned against him asking, "What did you say?" "I said no," he said more firmly. "This ends now. We're leaving." Helen's composure broke when she asked, "After everything I've done for you?" "That woman has poisoned you against your own family," Ryan remarked. "That woman is my wife." "Not anymore," Morton cut in with ease. "The divorce papers were filed yesterday. You have no legal right to—" With my phone filming everything, I walked into the doorway and asked, "To prevent us from?" "Breaking and entering, destruction of property, conspiracy." With the exception of Helen, they all froze like guilty kids. She flashed her sly smile. "Perfect timing, dear. We were just discussing the Anderson case and other family matters." I walked deeper into the room with Evan right behind me and said, "I can see that. But you made one mistake, Helen. You got sloppy. Desperate." She responded, "I don't know what you mean," as her voice became more strained. "The Anderson case was never about property fraud, was it? It was about covering up what really happened. What you did." Her smile faltered. "You're confused." Adding, "The real documents aren't behind that safe." I looked into Ryan's astonished eyes and said, "They're already with the district attorney. Along with proof that your mother embezzled millions from her own charity foundation. That's why she's so desperate to find evidence against my family, to protect herself." Chaos ensued in the room. Ryan stood motionless between them all as Helen reached for her lawyer and Chloe began to scream. However, I continued to watch Helen as her idyllic environment fell apart. Retaliation isn't always about ruining someone. Allowing them to ruin themselves is sometimes the solution. And sometimes speaking the truth is enough to bring about justice. My living area was painted in alternating shades of blue and red by the police lights. As she talked to the authorities, Helen sat primly on the couch, tears running down her flawlessly applied face. She pointed to me and wept. She's the one who's been hurting our family. I was just trying to protect my son. We have evidence of her harassment, Morton said with ease. Her obsession with destroying her mother-in-law's reputation. The break-in was merely an attempt to recover documents that rightfully belonged to the family. The recording of their entrance was no longer useful, and my phone felt heavy in my pocket. Like Helen always did, they had gone ahead of me and completely changed the situation. That isn't true, Ryan exclaimed abruptly. Everybody looked at him. Mother, stop, just stop. Helen's weeping stopped at once. Ryan, dear, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. He moved away from her and in my direction, but I retreated. Too late, too little. The embezzlement accusations, they're true, aren't they? Asked Ryan. That's why you've been so desperate to destroy Audrey's family's reputation, to cover your tracks. Everything I did was for this family, Helen stated. Her mask fell off entirely. She pointed a finger at me and threatened to destroy everything. That money secured your future, your sister's future, she said. The officers looked at each other. He heard someone talking into his radio. Mrs. Helen Miller, we're going to need you to come down to the station. This is ridiculous. I'm the victim here, she said to Morton, her attorney. Do something. Morton, meanwhile, was already moving in the direction of the entrance. I think our professional relationship has concluded, Helen, given the circumstances. After that, everything occurred pretty fast. As they led her away, Helen wailed and Chloe followed, complaining about loyalty to her family. The evidence I had acquired was being gathered, recorded, and labeled when Morton escaped during the confusion. Audrey, said Ryan. Don't, I said, putting my arms over myself as I felt icy. Just don't. I didn't know about the charity money. About any of it, I swear. I said, but you knew about the break-ins, the harassment, the lies, and my voice broke. You chose them. Every single time, you chose them. I can fix this? I pointed at our demolished house and said, fix what? My grandmother's letters are still gone. Our marriage is over. Your mother's going to jail. What exactly can you fix? There was Evan in the doorway. Audrey, the detective needs your statement. Ryan grabbed me by the arm as I tried to pursue him. I love you, he shouted frantically. Isn't that worth something? I remembered every touch, every promise, and every instance when I felt like we were actually creating something as I gazed at his hand on my arm. Then I recalled the last time I saw him pick his mother's falsehoods above my reality, helping them break into our house. I whispered, love without trust isn't love. It's just another form of control. He was standing in the ruins of our life together as I withdrew. The detective waited while filling out more paperwork and asking additional questions. I spent hours describing how I had discovered proof of Helen's embezzlement, how I had recorded her harassment, and how I had seen my marriage gradually deteriorate due to deceit and manipulation. Later, when I was by myself in my car, I took out my grandmother's final letter, not the one Helen had taken, but the authentic one. The one I'd held dear for years. Remember, dear heart, she'd wrote. Sometimes winning means walking away. Sometimes the greatest victory is in refusing to play their game at all. Ryan again buzzed on my phone. I turned off the phone and turned on the engine. He was standing in the doorway of what had been our house, looking lost, and I could see him in the rearview mirror. My heart grieved for a second, but as I drove away, I came to a realization. I had nearly turned into Helen in my attempt to destroy her. Manipulative, control-obsessed, and prepared to give anything up for success. My grandma had been correct. Taking down Helen wasn't the true victory. It was in releasing myself at last. The corridor of the courthouse was cold and long. While waiting for Helen's arraignment, I watched from a rough wooden seat while her society pals whispered to one another. They were still in shock that the president of their charitable board was being charged with embezzlement 3 weeks after the break-in. With black circles under his eyes, Ryan emerged at the end of the hallway. With her eyes like daggers, Chloe held onto his arm. I pretended to read emails while concentrating on my phone. His voice was closer than I thought. Audrey. Can we talk? I stated, the divorce papers are with your lawyer, without raising my gaze. Just sign them, He sat next to me, too near, and said, "That's not. Mother wants to make a deal now." I gave him a look. "A deal? If you drop the charges, she'll return all of your grandmother's letters." Bitter than coffee grinds, a giggle erupted. "You don't understand, do you? All that matters is that she is still my mother, isn't that right? She made mistakes despite everything she did and everything she stole, so I stood, seeking space. Errors? She terrorized me in my own home, stole millions from her own charity, and methodically destroyed our marriage," I said, turning heads. "Ryan, those aren't errors. They are options." Ryan was beckoned by Helen's smile, but before he could react, the doors of the courthouse sprang open, and Evan hurried in with a manila packet in his hand. Breathing heavily, he replied, "I found it in Morton's office." With shaky fingers, I opened the envelope to reveal a single document, a letter from Helen to her lawyer dated 3 years prior to my wedding. "What is that?" did Ryan ask. I looked through the contents and remarked, "Insurance. Just in case I ever threatened to take control of you." Helen had orchestrated this whole thing from the start, the harassment, the break-ins, everything, to make me appear crazy and fixated on the Anderson case, so I looked up as she came in handcuffed and accompanied by officers. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in Helen's eyes as they fixed themselves on the letter. "Where did that come from?" she insisted. I held up the letter and said, "Helen, you documented everything. Your lawyer isn't as loyal as you thought. Every stage of your scheme to ruin me. Everyone will now be fully aware of your identity." She rushed forward, but the officers stopped her. "You ungrateful little," she said. "Stop, Mom." Ryan positioned himself between us and said, "Stop. Everything I did was for you, to protect you from her." Helen said, her face crushed. "From where?" Ryan's voice broke. "From emotion? From a life that is beyond your control? She never loved you like I do." Helen said, her eyes hardening. "No," I cut him off. "I loved him enough to let him make his own decisions. You loved him enough to make sure he never could." The murmurs surrounding us became more intense. Chloe turned away from her mother, finally realizing the truth she had helped facilitate, and Helen's friends stared in horror as their ideal society matron broke before their own eyes. Evan whispered, "The arraignment's starting." The district attorney had been quietly waiting nearby, so I gave him the letter before turning to Ryan one more time. "I did love you," I replied. "But love shouldn't hurt like this. Audrey, please." "Goodbye, Ryan." As Helen was escorted into the courtroom, I turned to leave, her well-planned world crumbling in my wake. My grandmother's former legal partner texted me, saying, "I found something in the archives. Your grandmother would be proud." My phone rang. The autumn air outside was crisp and clean, and Evan caught up to me at the bottom of the steps leading to the courthouse. "You all right?" he inquired. As the wind pulled the leaves away from their limbs, I saw them strewn all over the sidewalk. Sincerely, I replied, "No, but I will be." Because sometimes defeating your adversaries isn't the only way to win. Refusing to allow them to ruin you is sometimes the key. And sometimes the best form of retaliation is just to walk away with your head held high, and let them deal with the fallout from their own decisions. In contrast to the suburban gloom I had left behind, the lights of downtown glittered through the window as the final box from my previous life stood unopened on the floor of my new apartment. Helen's carefully constructed reputation was shattered like a dropped teacup, and the society pages were already humming with scandal when Evan texted me about her sentencing, 5 years for embezzlement. Ryan was standing in the hallway with a familiar leather-bound bundle, and I froze when I heard a knock at the door. I recognized the pattern. 3 rapid taps, 1 slow. I said, "Grandmother's letters," with a constricted throat. He held them out as a peace gift and explained, "I found them in Mother's study while cleaning out the house. They were always yours." I took the bundle and traced the tattered edges with my fingers. "How is she?" He shrugged, saying, "Angry, bitter. She's in therapy. She claims to be beginning to comprehend certain aspects of our family. Along with you. Gaining the ability to stand alone." A painting and easel stood by the window, the canvas half covered in bold strokes of red and gold, something I'd discovered by mistake, a means to pour forth all words couldn't describe. He looked beyond me into the flat. "Simply, it helps," I said. "Audrey, I don't." As I moved away, I said, "We both know why it ended." "I understand. You should see," he said, bringing out an envelope containing the signed divorce papers and other items. It contained a 30-year-old newspaper clipping about a young Helen Miller who was frantically attempting to establish her social standing before marrying into a wealthy family. Ryan remarked softly, She was constantly terrified of losing control, of being shown to be inadequate. I now understand what she did, but I'm not condoning it. Understanding doesn't make it right. No, but it helps me not become her. Somewhere in the metropolis below, a siren screamed. Where I used to cringe at the sound, now it served as a reminder that life moves on, changes, and evolves. I told myself, I never wanted revenge, in shock at the reality. I just wanted to be free. I understand. You won because of that. He started to walk away but stopped. The picture. It's stunning. I opened the bundle of letters after he departed, and while my grandmother's words flowed across the pages, describing her strength, her courage to confront bullies, and her courage to choose integrity over retaliation, one piece, written shortly before her death, struck my attention. Because they are afraid of their own darkness, some people will attempt to dull your light, dear heart. You have more power if you keep shining than if you resist them. Not every story needed a tidy ending, and sometimes victory wasn't in killing or even forgiving your enemies, but rather in finding who you truly were without them. I grabbed up my brush and added blue touches to the canvas. My phone buzzed once more, and Evan was inviting me to dinner. No date yet, but perhaps someday. For the time being, friendship was sufficient, and I had my freedom, my truth, and my work. In my previous life, I would have perceived danger in the shadows created by the flickering city lights, but now I see opportunities, patterns, and untold stories. The canvas was waiting, the night was young, and I picked up another brush. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely free, not because Helen had lost, not because I had won, but because I had finally understood the difference between emancipation and retribution. And I discovered who I was in that disparity.